Oh my goodness, we're live. Hello.
Hello, guys.
Hello, friends of the internet. Welcome to my channel. If you are here, this is for the Rhythm of War critical review live stream. And oh man. All right. So you know what? Why am I so nervous about this one? You know why I'm nervous? Because this is the one that made me the most angry, I think.
Yeah, I think this is legitimately the channel where we were the most angry, like across the board.
You know why I'm nervous? It's because this book was such a mess. Like with other books, there were a lot of times, specific instances where I was like, okay, this is exactly what I'm bothering. And here it's just like, it's so nothing happens, but it's also so confusing that it's like really hard to concisely be like, this is what bothered me.
Yes.
Instead of just like the entire book was a mess.
Hi, Roro.
Hi. Also, I think we started too early. I think we should start with introductions.
Sorry. I needed to get that out. Okay, sorry. Hi. Thanks for being here. Welcome. If this is your first time catching one of the critical reviews that we have been working on for close to a year, hello and welcome. We'll start with some introductions from the co-hosts involved and then kind of talk about why we're doing this. So hi, my name's Steff. Welcome. I give honest book reviews. And also, and what we're doing, I'm drinking seltzer because it's spicy water and I'm spicy today. Go ahead, Scylla.
Hell yeah. Hi, I'm Scylla. I try to do book reviews every time I remember I have a YouTube channel, and I'm drinking vodka. Yay. Because if I don't drink vodka, I'm going to remember everything about this book. And it'll be bad, so...
Hi, I'm Sarah. I also upload videos on books when I have the spoons for it, which I currently do not. And I'm crocheting. Also, I have a gin tea, so that's good. I have a fancy one also. I got myself a fancy gin for Christmas, like early Christmas present.
Very nice.
You deserve early Christmas presents.
Yes. Yeah. We all deserve gifts after what we just went through. Okay.
Also, I have tea because we need tea.
Oh yes.
We're gonna get so true. This is so true, Roro. We're suffering so hard.
Emotions and alcohol to just cover the emotions.
Hi. Oh, you're here for the vibes. Oh,
yeah. The vibes are going to be something. All right.
Yes. Okay. So before we start talking about all of the things that we're going to have to talk about, because this is going to be a long one, let's talk briefly about why we're doing this in the first place. Okay. So I guess I'll just say a little bit and then whoever wants to jump in and add to it, because I feel like this is a caveat that we have to do at the beginning of every video, which is we were all fans at one point. We've all read this series in the past. This is not the first time that we're reading this. But something that I personally realized, and actually realized that I started to see the first time because, my gosh, can you see these tabs? Is that as the series has continued, there are certain things that were being portrayed in ways that made me personally feel uncomfortable, feel like the plot is being lost. And when we get to talking about representation, just didn't sit right with me, but the fandom has felt like an echo chamber for a long time. And so as book reviewers, we collectively decided to put out critical reviews because all books should have critical discussions because reading is a political act. So there's that. Does anyone want to add to that?
How dare you bring politics into reading?
How dare I? This book's not about politics at all.
I wanted to add because, like, as we said in like the backstage place, or as I said, I recently saw a tweet post something or the other that was like, I don't like hate reading and I don't understand hate reading and I don't understand when people hate read. And like that got me to thinking, because essentially it's what we said we're doing. We said we're basically hate reading. We knew when we started this like a year ago that we were not going to enjoy ourselves a lot by how we have engaged with Sanderson in the years before that, even though we all started out as fans. However, for me, this is also, aside from, providing the opportunity for other voices to be heard inside, this Sanderson bubble, for me, it's also almost like academically, like there's reading for enjoyment as a hobby, but it doesn't always have to be. And sometimes it's just really interesting to engage with books that you don't like. Mm-hmm. Not because you want to hate on them, but because you specifically want to learn something about yourself, about the books, about the fandom, about whatever. And that's what this is for me also. Like, it's not just, oh my God, we have fun shitting on Sanderson. Right. Obviously we do. And we're not trying to be like academically proper and, reveal our biases 100%, although we do that. So like, in a way, we are probably more unbiased in our talking about this than a lot of Sanderson fans, because we're aware of our biases and we tell the viewers our biases, which is all that you can do in academia, basically. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's like our few videos that we've made are just a drop in the bucket to the plethora of positive reviews out there. His books are some of the most popular ones on multiple reading apps. And so like a few negative reviews is not going to do anything to the series, to the fandom. It's just we wanted to open up a platform to be able to critically engage with a series, again, that we did love at one point. And in order to like provide a platform to just kind of talk about it, especially just as book reviewers, that's what you do. You review books. And so we are not afraid of having critical discussions about things. So I gotta say, regardless of everything that we felt this entire year, and we're not done yet because we still have book 5 to do, which we will be doing in the near future.
It's so long. Why is it so long?
I know, Why? But I've had so much fun actually doing this. And like, yes. I feel like I've gotten better at critically reviewing books in general from these discussions.
First of all, that, and I do also think that I've gotten a lot better at pinpointing what exactly my issues are. In this case, yes, specifically to Brandon Sanderson, but also just in general, because sometimes it can be very hard, especially with books that you used to really enjoy, to like pinpoint what exactly changed for you and what exactly you don't agree with anymore. Because in the first moment, you might sound like a hypocrite to yourself because you're like, well, I used to love this. I used to be super hyped about this. But I feel like the way that we're doing it with Brandon Sanderson, we ourselves are also learning why it worked for us the first time and why it doesn't work the second time when we read things while we're more aware, while we're in different bubbles, or while we're talking. Yes. Or while we're talking with different people about it.
Right. So if anything, this has been an exercise in, at least for me, growing as a critical reviewer. And I think, again, starting with something that I previously really enjoyed has just been a really eye-opening experience. So I'm not thinking of this either as like a hate read. I'm thinking of it as an exercise in growing as a reviewer.
Also, don't think that we are this composed in the Discord we have for this. If we sound like we're super pretentious and on our high horses, trust us when we say this. We've walked through the absolute mud that is our Discord messages. The channels are full. No one will ever see those channels.
Yeah, and also, by the way, once again, the thing also is that we like, if you love Sanderson, we don't care. Genuinely, we don't care if people love Sanderson, and you're welcome on, like, all of us have. Well, I think Scylla hasn't, but like Steff and me have made videos also outside of the live streams. And even in the live streams, if you want to politely disagree with us and be like, hey, this is why I disagree, you're welcome. But also, if you end up butthurt because of our because of our opinions, and I mean genuinely, like, not disagreeing but genuinely butthurt, then just go to one of the like thousands, maybe even tens of thousands reviews out there that crawl up Sanderson's butt and read those reviews. You do not need to be here. You do not need to be here.
First of all, that, but not a single one of the Stormlight Archive books, like the main ones, has a rating of under 4.6, and it has hundreds of thousands of ratings, every single one of them across the board. So your opinion of thinking that the series is the best that ever was is not a standalone opinion. You're gonna be fine.
And if it sounds like we're really hammering this in because it's been 10 minutes and all we've done is like give caveat, it's like because it always happens. No matter how much we say, like, it's okay, we're not telling you not to love it, we're not telling you not to like it, your feelings about it are as valid as our feeling as the rant that we're going to give. It's someone just decides to say something really negative and in the comments to try to get a rise out of us. And so just like, please don't waste your time. Please don't waste our time. Anyway, I don't know that we can be any more clear than that. So let's just.
I think that's the best label we can slap onto this.
Yeah.
Okay, before we get into the topics that we actually briefly reviewed before going into this. Can we have a very brief discussion about how the structure of this book was utter filth? Like very, very briefly.
Oh, go for it, Scylla.
Because this is the thing, right? The reason I personally found Rhythm of War to be the most excruciating out of the 4 that we've read so far is not necessarily because Brandon Sanderson is that much worse at the themes he handles in this book, even though some of them have escalated from the past. But it's actually just because the structure.
I think he is worse because he's starting to mix themes. At least,
you know what? That's fair. That is fair. That is very fair. But apart from the mixing thing, one of the reasons that Rhythm of War just does not work for me as a book is because the structuring of it is so shit. Like, this book is, like, I've read the German translation because I unhauled my copies. Oops, anyway. And in the German translation, this book is almost 2,000 pages, okay? And it is almost 2,000 pages of basically nothing happening of narrative importance. And the things that are happening are dragged out for chapters on end with nothing in between relating back to the incident. And I understand that in Rhythm of War, we have, I think, the most like parallel timelines going on. We have Adolin and Shallan in Shadesmar. We have everything that's happening with Urithiru and Raboniel and Navani. And then obviously in the same vein, but in a different like story arc, we have Kaladin also being in the tower, but whatever. And then we also have an entire war that's going on over all of Roshar that for some reason feels like the most backdrop. It's just there in the entire book, which I personally have a very big problem with, because if it's more important to you that a few people suffer in the Tower of Urithiru, while you don't really care that absolute war is ravaging the entirety of Roshar, to the point where the only war scene we get is Jasna being a girl boss for like 5 minutes, and then apparently learning that, oh no, fighting a war is hard. Like, no shit. Okay. I'm glad we've learned that lesson. I didn't know we needed to learn that lesson, but okay.
And like also to the point where you can just like abandon one of your main storylines for 200 or 300 pages.
Yes.
Like between the moment when Adolin and Shallan entered Last Integrity or something, the Honors Brand City, and by the time we get a chapter from them again, there's like a whole interlude in between, and then like 200 pages or something of like main plot.
Yeah. And also, like the thing is, I understand. Yes. It's so wild.
Okay.
Like, I understand that, you know, parallel storylines, whatever, they need their time, but also at some point we need to understand what's the most important one of them. Okay. And we just don't.
I think this is a great place to start going to our talking points. I think I'm going to make an executive decision to where we're going to start. No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. This is great. Okay, so I really want us to be able to have clarity on what it is we're trying to say by providing examples. But also, I just want to say thank you to everybody who is here in the chat. This is probably the most people that are here. And also, I recognize, yes, we are going to read book 5, and this definitely was a setup for book 5. But I also want to recognize that if you still love the series, that's okay. It's okay to like something and still critically engage with it. Like, that's fine. Totally fine.
It's a great exercise, actually. Start critically engaging with things you like, and then you'll be better at pinpointing things you don't like in the same critical manner.
Exactly. Okay, we're
oh god.
Oh, it's so long. But anyway, let's just move on to the talking points, because if not, we're literally going to be here all day. So, have a few slides. Let's see if this is it. So I'm going to skip us 2 of our talking points to piggyback off of what Scylla was saying about how the structure of this book, it just doesn't feel like it was properly planned out in a way that was effective. We're going to come back to talking about the listeners, singers, and odium, but I want to skip us to Kaladin's mental health. And the reason that I feel like, based on what was just said, that we need to start here for a second is because Kaladin's mental health is one of the main plot points of this book, and something that all of us noted on as a way that Sanderson does cliffhangers and chapters, but not even just cliffhangers and chapters, just the way that conversations pivot within chapters themselves is we'll be talking about something as important as Kaladin's mental health, and then the conversation will just change to something else. Like, we won't have that conversation fully flushed out. And because of that, it feels like I'm not sure if Sanderson has just bitten off more than he can chew by combining so many different metaphors for systemic oppression, for mental health, for the treating of people with disabilities, for racism, for classism, for all of these things that I'm just like, where are we going with this? Because every time we start a conversation about a very important topic, it doesn't resolve in a way for me that is satisfying. And I think Kaladin's mental health is a good example of that. Does anyone want to add to that point?
I think for me, a big issue with Kaladin's mental health in this book is, and I think we've said that in like past live shows, that Kaladin's mental health is one of the few things that we think Sanderson wrote genuinely well. Like in book 1, the scene at the honor chasm is like, it's a really important scene. There are problems with like the theming, and also Sanderson, because Sanderson like ties everything to personal struggle. There could be more with Kaladin in terms of, structural oppression and how that ties into his mental health, but that's Sanderson. Aside from that, he did genuinely do well. However, in this book, it feels like Kaladin's mental health story isn't anymore about Kaladin growing as a character and his personal journey, but it's more so about plot. And we need Kaladin to have a breakdown now so that this plot can happen. And it makes it really uncomfortable to read at a lot of times. And TMI about my personal mental health maybe, but when I read the last 50 pages, I wrote to Scylla that like I genuinely started crying because I was so angry that Kaladin wasn't allowed to catch a break by Sanderson, and that it's like a positive thing that he, gets himself together and like fights again, and that he's not allowed to just be allowed to just let someone else handle it. I mean, technically it happens because he steps back from whatever, yada yada. I don't know if it just made me angry because I'm personally in like a spot right now where I should probably take a break and not push on, and I keep pushing on. But it just like, and also everything with the therapy, it's like, the therapy doesn't need to like work over years. It like instantly works or something.
I get what you mean, because I feel like ultimately we don't really get to see Kaladin working through his own mental health and demonstrating or being illustrated through interactions with other characters where he's making his own progress by himself in a way that is constructive. His way of working with his mental health is by constantly working harder or through helping others, right? And this idea of, well, someone can, by uplifting the others that are around him that are also dealing with mental health, that he's also like doing that for himself, is very unrealistic in my personal experience with mental health. But also I feel like that just kind of takes away from us really looking at all of the factors that have caused him to have this mental health breakdown in the first place. Like, we've never addressed how classism and racism as systemic issues on Roshar are what ultimately led him to the position in which he was in book 1. And because we never addressed that, we've never gone back to actually reflect as to what is happening around him that is keeping him from really moving past it. It's only focused around things that are relevant to the plot, as Sarah mentioned. So, for example, what he's feeling about the loss of his younger brother, Tien. And like, yes, that is valid, but there's more here at play than just that one thing. And that even when he does deal with his mental health, I'm going to say deal with like quotation marks, because to me it's questionable if it's even dealt with, but it's in a way that ultimately moves the story forward in the direction of Dalinar's plans for the success of the Alethi. And I don't like that.
With Dalinar, but I do also want to add, I think, especially with the 4th book, I think one of the reasons it feels so off to us, which is something that I figured out trying to get past the last like 100 pages or something, and it's because the entire emotional climax of book 4 criminally relies on Kaladin overcoming battle shock.
Mm-hmm.
And like that has not been the case for the other books, specifically not with Kaladin, because like, you know, in book 1 we have Kaladin deciding that the Bridge 4 is now going to run to Dalinar's help, which is the climactic moment of book 1, which in my opinion is still the climactic moment that works the best, even though none of us liked Dalinar at the moment, but it still worked for us even on reread to a certain extent. In book 2 we have the whole battle around Urithiru, we have Kaladin and Seth, and we have another thing we had issues with, which was the whole like the oath situation and how fucked up that was. But still, it was relatively contained within itself. We did have a battle as a climactic moment that did not immediately and incidentally rely on Kaladin basically getting past his mental problems. But book 4 does that. The only reason he is able to triumph at the very end is because he is able to overcome a complete and utter mental barrier that he's had this entire time, because the 4th ideal that he has to swear, I accept that there's people I cannot save, directly goes against his trauma, which he has, which started essentially because of Tien, but has, you know, been brought up over and over and over again, sometimes for characters it was not warranted for, El Hokar, sometimes for characters it was warranted for. And so there's just a massive issue with how book 4 relies upon Kaladin getting better in the climactic moment of the series.
And how it's once again, like, Kaladin is only allowed to get better if it's to someone else's use. Kaladin's entire arc is about like not seeing the worth in himself. It's like it's the whole problem with the like parable that Wit tells Kaladin, right? Which on the surface is about Kaladin is supposed to see that he's enough in himself. But no, the parable actually tells you that he's only enough if he's exceptional. Yeah, that's the right word.
Yes.
Which is then on the other hand so fucked up, because we do have a character who, on like through the help of others and also on their own, in like the 2 POV chapters that he gets in this book, learns that he's enough. We have Teft. Teft is an extremely self-destructive character. He is someone who is addicted to a drug. And he himself also has a lot of self-worth issues. And there's like this interaction between Kaladin and Teft where it's like Teft, I think, offers to like play bait or something, and Kaladin is like, no, you're not. And I forgot what exactly Teft said, but the chapter ended with like a line, or there was a line near the end where he's like, no, I deserve to live, actually. And that's something that's good and that's positive and that feels very organic. The next time we get a POV chapter from Teft is when he
dies.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And he is killed 100% to ruin Kaladin's mental health again, to push him into finally accepting that there's people he can't protect, which is so fucked up that's Teft, who was one of the, if we go from like Bridge 4 at the very beginning, one of the 4 people that Kaladin confided in, because there was Rock, there was Sixil, there was Moash, and there was Teft. Those were the 4 people that Kaladin leaned on in book 2. And he was a plot point. He was a plot point for someone else's arc who didn't even get their arc anymore properly, because their arc is also just there to serve the plot and to serve others and to, once again, I don't know, be like, well, Kaladin came to the realization Dalinar is the one who knows best after all. Like, he was right all along.
I do also want to put in here very quickly, we are aware that oftentimes there's stories where characters are just supposed to be plot devices. That is okay. There are certain stories that genuinely need for their characters to just be archetypes so they can tell a moral instead of going for like a developed story with developed characters being the key point here. However, the problem with Brandon Sanderson specifically is that, first of all, this is not how he builds up most of his characters. They are not built up to be plot devices up until the very moment where he needs them to be, in which case he throws all characterization out of the window for some goddamn reason. And number 2, it's because a lot of people interacting with his series like to see it in a different way. And I personally think that at this point, I think this is kind of dangerous, because it tells me that you are unable to recognize when a character is simply used as a plot device, which again, doesn't have to be a negative thing. It is a negative thing precisely because Brandon Sanderson seems to be very adamant about it not being so. All of his interviews he does about characters and their mental health and how he's trying to depict them in a good way, how he tried to do a lot of research for example, DID, so he could depict Shallan's struggles well or something like that. All of those point towards the idea that at least he thinks he's doing something good with these characters.
Also,
he's not.
Opinion, there's a difference between a character being a plot device like Alhokar, who maybe had a similar arc like Teft, in that they died shortly after he died shortly after he realized his own worth or something, but he never got his own POV chapters.
True.
As such, it's like wholly different for those types of characters to be a plot device rather than someone who maybe in this book got like a handful of POV chapters, but who has gotten POV chapters for a few books now, for at least 2. Like, there's a difference there, at least for me.
I'm gonna just say hi to Josh, who's in the chat.
Hi Josh.
Hi. And thank you for being here. Appreciate it. So yeah, something that I want to add to this a little bit is something that happened in book 1 that I have just not been able to let go, and I feel like is relevant to the ending of Rhythm of War, is that before I say this point, I want to reiterate something that we've said many times in most of our discussions, is that the whole Alethi class system, in which they use a physical marker, light eyes and dark eyes, is also a metaphor for racism. right? We literally have slavery. We have chattel slavery. We have all of these things that are correlations to things that we've seen in our societies, right? And so it's not far-fetched to say that Kaladin and his family, having darker eyes, and also Moash and other characters who were of a lower caste in book 1, can be seen as characters of color because of what they go through. However, that narrative that was established in book 1 is completely chucked out of the window at some point. But to me, I haven't forgotten that, right? And so with that information, to me, as being extremely relevant, especially in book 1, where we have the scene of Dalinar visiting Kaladin in jail after he's asked for his boon and telling him to be an exceptional brown-eyed person, right? To be an exceptional person who rises through the ranks and achieves greatness because people of a lighter colored caste have told him that he has done it the right way and not to rock the boat. And so now we are finally at the crux of Kaladin's mental health being cured, not cured. I'm going to take that back and not say cured, but being resolved in some way at the help of this magic and Dalinar seeing that he needs help and him saying the right things. So now he's kind of like, he's surpassed everything to this point. He has become that exceptional person that Dalinar told him 3 books ago, you need to become to be the leader that you want to be so much. And it's like, it's still very much relevant that he started off as a brown-eyed person, and it's still very relevant what he represents. And so this whole thing that we've established from book 1 to even book 2, where we started to see Moash, who we will talk about, interacting with brown-eyed people and with singers, and when he was enslaved, and all of these themes were there for so long. And for those themes to not be relevant at a major point in a main character's mental health just feels like my time has been wasted. It feels like something was used as a plot point in order to drive a story forward before, but is no longer relevant because the character now symbolizes ultimately what the writer wanted them to symbolize, which in this case, with Kaladin having light blue eyes, in this metaphor of racism, is now equivalent to a higher upper echelon metaphorical magical white person. And that just does not sit right with me on any level.
I do also want to add, this is a very, very small point, so I do not blame anyone for missing it. There's just sometimes these random small things that jump out to you. In book 4, as Erythero is being besieged and ultimately owned by Raboniel and some of the other fused whatever, there's a moment where Kaladin loses connection to Syl, and thus also loses connection to his radiant powers. And Teft specifically remarks upon the fact that Kaladin's eyes have turned back to a darker color because, and I don't remember the exact wording of this because first of all, I read it in translation. Second of all, because I'm not here for that right now. But he essentially says something along the lines of like, if you're parted from your shard blade, if you're parted from your spren for a longer period of time, your eye color as a radiant goes back to the eye color you had previously. Because if I remember correctly, it has been established that every radiant gets like this super light blue, right? Which is the lightest color you could possibly have unless you have white eyes.
Remember if it's light blue specifically, like that's also such a weird thing why Radiant specifically get light blue colors. I mean, we know that Kaladin has light blue color eyes because as far as I know, we have light eyes from pretty much every other color. We have brown-eyed light eyes. They just have
they're
more
just
of
light
a golden color. We have green-eyed light eyes. It's not about the color of the eyes. It's about how light it is. However, Sanderson automatically translates that to light blue for Kaladin, when it would make way more sense because I don't think that he's been established as having like dark blue eyes.
No, I think his eyes are dark brown actually.
Yeah, they are
pretty brown.
They're established like they're described But yeah, anyway.
But because the lighter the blue eyes, the higher ranked they are, the higher they are in this system of solving the problems and being part of the upper echelon. Like, is it a Freudian slip? I don't know. Why can't we just have extremely bright green eyes or hazel eyes, whatever the case is?
I don't know, man. Maybe there's something about the blue eyes that we should be looking out for.
I don't know.
But basically, my point was, the issue is not resolved. Like, yes, in the book, it's also kind of established that Dalinar kind of more or less tries to go like, oh yeah, I can now also have dark eyes as officers, which, yay for equality, I suppose. So, other thing.
I have things to say about that, but
there's so many things to say about that. But like, the general problem, quote unquote, of people having dark eyes is obviously not resolved. So like, the structures of racism, because that's what I'm going to call it, because that's what it is. The structures of racism in Russia, and specifically Alethi society, are still very much in place. And it's these small moments of like these very small descriptions feel like even more of a slap in the face, because this is not addressed in the wider scale at all. It's just name dropped every now and then. Like that one moment where Navani is very confused for a few sentences about how she's supposed to call a dark-eyed officer because she can't call him Bright Lord. Like, and the problems are so obviously still there, but we're not doing anything with them.
Also, by the way, like, these problems are only still there if it's like Yasna or something, because like dark-eyed are now equal to light eyes because Dalinar has dark-eyed officers now, apparently.
Obviously that fixes everything, right?
So you know, we don't need to talk about structural issues anymore. However, when a light eyes could be discriminated against, like Yasna in the case of this one general whatever dude who's like, I shall not follow a woman into battle or whatever, I don't remember, it's whatever. I don't care anymore.
Right.
Then we can talk about people still having preconceived notions. But when it's dark eyes, Navani has to mention how, like, strangely, it's the dark eyes who seem to have more problems, like, you know, with the new order of things. Like, they seem to really hold on to,
because
like,
they're not progressive. They're not good, intellectual, progressive people.
Oh, we have an answer. Light blue is a color of Stormlight, so if all characters gain blue eyes for being shard bearers, it could make sense. Some characters gain other shades of light eyes from gaining shards. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if it's light blue, then to be honest, it would also be because, like, for example, Shallan has like violet eyes or something. Then I think she should have changed eyes as well.
Does she have violet eyes? I forgot.
I'm not sure. I think his eyes are blue specifically because of Syl. I didn't check if it might be all honor spend bonds make blue, and you might get 10 different colors of light eye. Okay.
Yeah, but again, that's the point with Shallan. Then we should have also made a point of like having Dalinar and Shallan having changed eyes, whichever color.
I don't remember if that's ever talked about.
I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure it's not. The only time we talk about Shallan's eye color is when she decides to do brown face. So.
Oh God, I don't even want to. That was in book. I don't even want to go back there. I don't want to talk about it.
Just wanted to very briefly throw that into the room. We did have that conversation, but the other way around and infinitely worse.
Yes, we did have that conversation. So like, for me, the whole suddenly this issue of racism just dropping into the backdrop and as something that is no longer important to the way that characters interact in this world, just because the Alethi have suddenly decided, you know, that brown eyes have equal rights and is no longer an issue, is really, to me, just giving I don't see color, because that there's absolutely no way that our characters would not have more interactions in this way with other people that are having issue with them rising to certain ranks. Like, again, we started to get some of that in other books, but it just didn't resolve in any way that felt meaningful for me. And in this book just felt like it completely fell to the backdrop.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. I was giving an explanation. I'm agreeing that it's a point of inconsistency. I think Moash gains light eyes, tan eyes. Yes, I do remember that. That is very
Actually,
that was an
explanation.
thing.
If we say explanation, it's not a negative thing. Like Josh knows a lot of times. I think we've also mentioned it in the past. Live shows, Josh
Every
is
single
our
one of them.
screaming Discord, and a lot of times if we scream about something that is inconsistent with the lore, Josh will come and like be like, hey, actually it's this, because he loves us enough that he lets us scream, but he wants us to be like educated in our screaming.
Yes. So
he's like, you get
that.
to be upset about this, but let's stick to the facts and then be upset about the facts.
Yes. So thank you for pointing out things if there's anything that we are missing the point on, and for providing facts for us for that. So absolutely.
A lot of times if things are explained to us, actually we think they're worse than they were.
I mean, for point and example, right? So mentioning that Moash has tan eyes. So, and thinking about that, right? But Moash having tan eyes, a shade of a light brown, is still our villain. Like, I feel like that still resonates in some vein of what we were talking about, but I digress.
Let's get to Moash in a second.
Should we actually get to Moash? I was just about to say.
Yeah, we should probably get to Moash. Here it says, I notice people in these novels can have feelings and emotions that aren't entirely positive, like sadness, without being mentally ill. Too much pathologizing.
Actually, that's a good point. I don't think we've ever talked about that.
Yeah,
but now that I think about it.
Like, for instance, I think the most mentally stable person of the like main cast is Adeline, and I'm pretty sure that almost every single time we could have a conflicting emotion about characters like Dalinar, for example, who famously killed Adeline's mother and then professed to that in front of the entire world by writing a book before talking to his actual son about this. Every single time we could have an emotion like that, he just kind of represses it, and then I think he has like one breakdown in Shallan's arms where he's like really sad about it, and then that's it, and you're just standing there like, all right, that's a bit strange.
And he like the most he allows to feel is like kind of not enough in a as like normal one in the world of Radiance.
And I'm just over here like, buddy, that is the absolute least of your problems. Your problem is that your father murdered your mother and then did not even have the decency to talk to you first about it. Like,
right.
Which, by the way, Adeline is also not allowed to have complicated feelings about, because Dalinar, like, we can't have a character not crawling up Dalinar's ass until they come out the other side brown.
Right. But brown is a bad color, Sarah.
Listen, I lost what I was going to say. Yeah, but I mean, the whole Dalinar and the thrill thing is not an excuse for me. He's still a warmonger at the end of the day, just because the thrill is not quote unquote there, or maybe is still there. I don't care enough to remember when it disappeared.
Someone remind me that I have a point to make when we start talking about Venli. That is related to Dalinar and the thrill, but I'm gonna make that when we get to Venli, because it's very important to me.
Okay, put a pin in that. But like, that is not an excuse to me. At the end of the day, he's still a warmonger, but we can't be mad at him because the people that he's warmongering against are the indigenous people of this planet, which are also a metaphor for Native Americans. Yay! Woo! So nobody cares.
It's such a mixed bag of bullshit.
Lie, though. Not necessarily Native Americans. I'm just gonna say it right
here. Indigenous peoples in general.
Also, a lot of really uncomfortable, like, Palestinians, Holy Land.
Yes. Yes. Oh God, you're so correct.
I don't know if that is quote unquote accidental, because he is, after all, very religious. So it kind of just happens. I don't know if it's just been especially on our mind in the past year for obvious reasons, but yeah, it's
a mixture of all of these things.
We will get to that. We're gonna have a lot of things to say about the singers and the listeners and odium and just the indigenous peoples of a land being controlled by the literal manifestation of quote unquote named evil. That's not a problem.
Right.
Huge problem.
Absolutely not a problem. I don't know what you're saying.
What are we talking about?
Come on, let's.
So we said we wanted to talk about Moash next. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh boy. Okay.
Let's maybe start tying it into Kaladin's mental health and start with the first appearance of Moash in this book. How, like, everyone complains about Moash telling Kaladin to kill himself, like, or saying that Kaladin has two options, but that he knows he won't take one of the two options. Yep. While everyone in the fandom is completely ignoring that is a big fat sign of Moash himself being suicidal as fuck.
Like, genuinely,
he actually just wants to stop existing, and that is like the best way that he found.
Rereading book 4 made it so much worse for me because, okay, I'm gonna come out and say this. I've been a Moash apologist basically from the start, okay? Partially because I love toxic ships, but also because sometimes I look at characters and I recognize that they are incredibly tragic, which doesn't mean that they have to be right, okay? Let's just establish that first and foremost. But I've been not necessarily on Moash's sides, but I have been what people might consider a Moash apologist from the start. And this has gotten worse with the reread, because reading book 4 again and looking at every single Kaladin and Moash scene just makes me go, does no one realize that Moash just genuinely wants to stop existing? Like, it's right there!
It's so sad.
Also right there in the last POV chapter where he gets his feelings back, which feels very much like someone who is like, or reads very much like someone who is deeply depressed, who realized that his suicide didn't work.
Right? Like, hello, excuse me. Also, just in general, so many of the moments between Moash and Kaladin, where Moash, yes, is tempting Kaladin to jump and to kill himself, right? Because that is very obviously what he's doing, okay? I'm not saying he's not doing that. But, like, the way he's trying to convince Kaladin to do that is by going, aren't you tired of the pain too? Excuse me. And, like, of course, this is not a healthy way to deal with anything. That's not what we're saying either. But, like, isn't it obvious that what Moash is feeling is such indescribable pain and suffering that he sees no way out but to stop his feelings altogether? You know what that reminds me of? Massive depressive episodes.
And I just want to kind of just go over like Moash's arc really quickly. So, and again, to reiterate, for what feels like the 10th time, we are not saying that what Moash did was good. We are not saying that what he did was right. All of it, yes, is completely messed up. But if I look at the reason why I'm so sad about the direction that Moash's character has taken is because of the amount of potential that Moash had as a character to address all those intersectional systems of oppression that we were talking about in book 1 and that we established and worked through a little bit more in book 2. And that is definitely present with Venli and the listeners and everyone else in book 4. And instead of doing that, he just becomes a plot point in order for Kaladin to ascend. And I hate that. Moash had brown eyes. His family was murdered by Elokar because of the systems of oppression that be, because of racism and because of classism, all of that jazz. And it's never really addressed. Also, we see him in book 2 as, first of all, him and Kaladin were both slaves, right? They were slaves, and then Moash also
wasn't, I think.
He wasn't a slave?
He wasn't a slave. He doesn't have the slave brand.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Specifically, he doesn't have a slave brand, and like we already knew he was bad because he didn't get the bridge 4 on his forehead to cover his slave brand, but he got it on his shoulder.
How dare he? How dare he?
We'll come back.
Terrible.
Well, he was in bridge 4, right? Yeah. Which is like the lowest, like of the what's it called? The expendable workforce.
Yeah, and he wasn't in a position where he could leave either. Like, it doesn't matter that he wasn't a slave, he still couldn't leave.
Right.
Exactly.
And so he's in this forced labor, and then there's a point in book 2, if I recall correctly, where he is with I think it's the Parshmen who ran away, and that they're still inflicting the same acts of mass control and slavery that the Alethi were doing to the Parshmen originally, and that they were continuing upon their own people. And he kind of like stands up in one of those scenes and he's around this, right? He's one of the few characters who has continuated in these perpetuated systems. And instead of using him to address that, and also recognizing that those systems had an effect on his mental health, and that he is also grappling with mental health just as much as Kaladin is, in a different way that is worth examining. He is villainized. And that it feels like such a waste of a character. It feels like making that kind of character the villain, I don't have words. Someone take over.
What I also think very interesting is we do get a scene specifically in this book where he gets to vocalize how fucked up everything is, and how much his family has been betrayed, and how much he has suffered both on the hands of Elhokar as well as just in general the system as a whole. And the way the scene is portrayed is as him being the ultimate evil that is currently advancing against Navani, to the point where the actual antagonist of this arc, Raboniel herself, goes against Moash, who has been directly recruited by Odium. That's a whole different talking point we're going to get to. Don't worry about that. But like, Raboniel herself goes against Moash to help Navani, which also makes no sense. We'll talk about that as well later on. And that is the only moment, apart from that moment in book 2, where Moash talks to Kaladin about this and tries to convince Kaladin that this is why they should kill Elhokar, where Moash gets to explicitly voice just how fucked over he's been by the system. And the only thing it gives us is that Moash is an even bigger villain than he was from the start. And I think that is worth examining every once in a while, because what the actual fuck happened there?
Right. And that whole conversation that Moash has with Navani, I was so upset by that conversation, because he says the thing that we wanted him to say, right? When he's saying to Navani, like, your people did this to me. Your people are racist. Your people are messed up. And it's your fault that society is so fucked. And her response that just completely changes the tone of the scene after that point is like, yeah, but you're a traitor. So like him being a traitor to Kaladin and Bridge 4, which like I'm still trying to wrap my head around why Navani and the upper echelon give so much of a shit about Bridge 4.
That is my exact point. That is my exact point with Moash as well. And this is something that consistently happens, so this will come up a lot every time I have the word about characterization, is that Brandon Sanderson needs his characters to give us a hint of what we're supposed to be feeling so badly that more often than not, his characters express emotions they shouldn't even have in the first place. Like, at the very beginning of book 4, where Moash appears for the first time as Vyre in front of everyone else of the cast, which he before that did not, Navani makes a point of calling him the traitor, not a traitor. And I'm just over here like, he is not important enough for her to care about him and to have earned that epithet. The only reason she calls him that is because we as readers are supposed to think that he is the traitor. He is the most important traitor of the series because he dared to betray Kaladin personally. And how dare he? Because that is a cardinal sin, whatever. And it makes no sense because Navani has a perfectly good reason to hate Moash. He is the person who killed her son. She could just call him Elhokar's killer, Elhokar's murderer. She would be perfectly reasonable to do so as a character, but she needs to refer to him as the traitor so we as readers remember that that's Moash's defining character trait. And it's fucked up.
Yes, especially because ultimately Navani ends up on the moral high ground in that scene. And that goes back to something that we've talked about in our other reviews, is that even if there is a small point in which a character finally says, hey, maybe genocide isn't good. Hey, maybe what's happening is something that we should address or kind of maybe talk about, you know, or like examine. Ultimately, another character will step in and say, yeah, but this, redirect the conversation. And the character who came in with the rebuttal to that point will end that chapter on a moral high ground.
Yep.
It feels like those characters are usually mentioning it so Sanderson can be like, hey guys, I know it, I'm aware. This is a problem. However, here's the reason why we're not addressing it, and it's because we're at war or because whatever. And like, even as someone, reading these things post the pandemic, apocalypse doesn't stop social struggle.
No, it
Yes.
does not.
Social struggle more important.
Yes, it highlights it, and also it increases the gap that has created that schism in the social hierarchy regardless. Yes.
But Sanderson doesn't even know his systems of power because he calls a country that has an emperor, even just in name, a republic. So
I found a note, I found an annotation I did that goes back to the sash glyph, which like I was so baffled by this, right? Because the sash was the symbol branded upon Kaladin, and a symbol of, for people to know, this is a slave, right? Slave that
and
may
specifically
have
a dangerous slave, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah. And something that happens throughout this book is that his slave brand ultimately becomes a symbol of resistance.
Oh God, yeah.
So the annotation that I wrote at the end of this chapter says, oppressor makes symbol to identify and oppress a specific group, leads to a member of oppressed group rising to member of oppressive community, which leads to oppressors co-opting said symbol onto themselves to signify resistance without addressing the original issue.
To be fair, I don't think it's the oppressors. I think it was Dark Eyes.
Dark Eyes.
But wasn't it also some of the Light Eyes in Urithiru specifically, like towards the end of that scene?
Could be that it also was, but it was started by like the Dark Eyes because it was started by the people that Kaladin helped in therapy, which were soldiers.
Right. But I would also argue that in order for them to have come to that conclusion that this is something that we need to signify is because they themselves are a product of this oppressive system.
Yeah.
It's like those who are oppressed upon know the oppressive system best, and therefore with different levels of brainwashing or whatever it may be, in order for that system to perpetuate, there is self-induced hatred that happens among oppressed groups that allow that system to continue because they are not aware of how that system continues to affect their own communities, and so they put it upon somebody else, right? So that being said, I've also wrote, all of this is explained to us by a member of a former indigenous slave who is a colonizer sympathizer. How does any of that make sense?
It's also one more simple thing that happens is that in that weird like airship thingy that Navani makes, they put the original Bridge 4 into it, and then Navani gets to describe how every member of Bridge 4 kind of like honors the bridge. And I'm just over here like, this is just meant to make people feel good about the fact that people like Navani and Dalinar care enough about Bridge 4 to think that they do their little ritual and be like, this is so cute. Like,
which, by the way, I do not get why the airship would be called the Fourth Bridge.
I don't understand anything of that. I don't know what's going on. I genuinely, like, okay, listen, that Dalinar might do this because he's the first one to, like, remark upon Bridge 4 as, like, his pet project that he saved from the ground, essentially. Fine. But, like, the entire situation is so weird and so uncomfortable, and I'm just sitting over here like, we could have just not done this because the only thing that you're trying to do is make us feel good. And I'm done feeling good for actions that have, first of all, no consequences, but also actions that are just there. So we forget about all the fact that you're consistently spewing about Dark Eyes still being oppressed, by the way, Sanderson. Just because there's a magic solution to it does not mean that it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Shocker.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And also, even though we do have dark eyes, we still have another level to this hierarchy, which is the Parshmen, who were the literal slaves in Alethi society. So there's more to this. And I think that, yes, like we had in some areas some discussion of light eyes versus dark eyes, but there is not enough conversation had at all about dark eyes to Parshmen.
No.
Also something that keeps being ignored, even though it's mentioned at the very beginning of this book, is that there's literal human slaves.
Mm-hmm.
That Dolinar is really, really, really against abolishing slavery. Like, he's literally really extremely upset at Yasna's idea of abolishing slavery.
Because then how would their Arithiru run? How would their society run, Sarah?
Yeah, like how dare we start thinking about societal structures while in the middle of a war? It's not like that is exactly when societal structures are most important.
Yeah.
What am I thinking? God, it's so annoying. And like super, super brief, I said this in the Discord before, and I'm very, very sad to say that I cannot recommend this book to English speakers because it's an original German one. But like this whole topic of people consistently trying to rebut our points by saying something like, well, but it's the middle of the apocalypse. How could they possibly think about social structures now? There's a book in German which is like a fantastical reiteration of Hannibal moving against Rome. And you'd think the entire book would be busy with just the war that Hannibal is waging on Rome specifically, but the entire book has time to not once, not twice, but throughout the entirety of its 420 pages, remark upon societal structures and women's position in societal structures, and in general, just how people are treated differently in a war that does or does not concern them. This book has 420 pages. That is like a third of your normal Stormlight Archive book. So at some point, we need to face the fact that Brandon Sanderson just does not want to have these discussions. And that's okay. I guess I'm not okay with it, but it's okay in general. But like, I need everyone to stop pretending like he would like to have these conversations, but doesn't have the time to do so. He has over 1,000 pages per book. He has the time. If he's not making the time, it's because he doesn't want to.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I think it's perfectly fine that not all books have like full length discussions on like societal issues. It also doesn't need to be explicit. Like,
yes.
I don't need my books to be like, slavery is bad, actually. You know, there's ways to do that aren't like on the nose a lot of times. Actually, a lot of times I might prefer that if it's like not too, like, you know, literal exposition dumped by a main character talking about why slavery is bad. Like, I enjoy narrative subtleties a lot of the times. It's why R.F. Kuang, The Poppy War, why that didn't work for me. Because R.F. Kuang is not a subtle author. She will punch you in the face with her point.
15 times in a row, yes.
Yeah. But, and I forgot where I wanted to go. Yeah. But the problem is, Sanderson writes an incredibly political story. And I don't mean just political in the way of there's politics in this book or there's like in-book politics. I mean, it's incredibly political in the way that the characters are coded, in the way that he consciously or unconsciously adds themes, in the way that the characters relate to each other. However, he refuses to interact with these themes, with these characters, with the coding in any meaningful way. And that's the issue we have.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
It's again this thing where like I read so many books where there's nothing like super on the nose preachy about them. I'm not saying these books aren't political. That's a whole other topic we're not going to get into right now as to why books are or not political, but just be aware that even your cozy fantasy is probably political in some way, but whatever. But like, I read a lot of books where politics are not the point. The problem is that in Brandon Sanderson's books, and specifically in the Stormlight Archive, there is so much going on about virtue signaling, about mixing certain metaphors, about trying to talk about racism by having one of your main characters, Kaladin, be majorly impacted by, yes, fantasy racism, but still racism in a way, and then just never going anywhere with this, or just downright excusing the Light Eyes nobility of how they've been treating people and how they continue to treat people by making Kaladin into an exceptional Dark Eyes who just happened to do the right things in order to raise himself up in society, except he's not really risen up into anything. He just gets to have depression as a treat again. And that is not even to touch upon how Brandon Sanderson treats the singers and listeners and the fused and all of that, which I think we should probably start going into that now, because I think we're done talking about Kaladin and Moash for the moment.
Yeah.
So let's just
I'm pretty sure from what Josh told us about Wind and Truth, I am pretty sure that Kaladin and Moash will come back, or at least Moash will come back in our 5th live show.
But now he's also blind, so that's a whole other thing.
Oh, that's true.
That I completely forgot happened, but that I'm kind of appalled by. I
completely forgot.
Yeah, it's a whole thing, which I think in a society where eye color is so significant is honestly even more problematic than I realized at first. So just putting that out there.
Okay, so singers, listeners, and Odium. Put these together because Odium being the leader, more or less, of the indigenous peoples of this planet, and Honor being the one that the humans are attempting to follow. I don't know where we want to start with this. Do we want to start?
I actually have a thing I could start with.
Okay,
and that is how differently Eshonai's and Venli's flashbacks are treated in the book compared to Shallan's, Kaladin's, or Dalinar's.
Okay. Go for it.
Because in the first 3 books, first of all, we got I don't know if like amount wise or page wise it's the same or whatever. I did not count that. I'm not interested in counting that. Something I did notice, however, is that the flashbacks for the other 3 always start within the first part. The flashbacks here, I think, started after the 2nd interludes, maybe even the 3rd. Fairly late, however, and close to the 2nd half of the book. And the other thing is where Dalinar, Kaladin's, and Shallan's flashbacks are about them. Like they are fundamentally about them and about how they ended up in the position they're in now. For Eshonai and Venli, it is at least as much, if not more, about how did we get here with the plot right now, where we are. It's way more about plot than about them. I mean, sure, you could say that it's like about characterization a little bit with Venli, at least. And how she's been manipulated by was it Umi or something?
Ulim, I think is the name. Yeah.
Right. Tumi, I think is
the one that Verlaine gets.
Spren or something.
Yeah, Tumi is also the one that Verlaine gets in the end.
Oh yeah. That was it, maybe. So and that's already like, it just shows how Sanderson sees the singers and how he doesn't really see them as singular characters, if he sees anyone but Dalinar as a singular character, to be honest. Like, we don't know.
I mean, even they have to love Dalinar at the end of the day. None of them can
God, yes. Oh God, yes. I'm so annoyed by that. I hated everything about it.
So yeah, and also a lot of like, there's a lot of really uncomfortable things. I mean, maybe if we're generous, we could say like he kind of pushed it back a little bit with the last interlude with or the last chapter with Venli. but there was this really uncomfortable thing at the very beginning with Ash and I, which Steff talked a lot about in the chat. I remember I talked about it as well a little bit, and then Scylla came in too late and was like, these bitches already talked about it. I don't need to write anything.
Then sometimes we have the exact same thought, and I'm like, I don't need to repeat this for the 5th time. It's all right.
Remind me which part it was.
Ash and I and maps, and how it's seen as something fundamentally negative that listeners don't see a reason for maps, and they have all their knowledge in songs, which is ironic. Considering that it's a very big point in the last chapter of Venli, where it's like, our like the like Venli's mother, Yaxim, or I think it was something like Yaxim, doesn't remember the songs. We have lost the songs, and then it's important that Venli does still remember the songs. However, it's like there's a very distinct preference of written over like oral history.
Yeah,
I mean, that's been evident since book 1, especially when we see them trying to create art and failing at doing art. And it's like, for why is it that we continue to have these stories in which the indigenous characters are constantly looking at the colonizers and thinking, wow, we want to be just like them?
Yes, that is the huge point in the Venli topic that we're going to get to. I would like to reiterate one very important point that I've been harking about since the beginning of time, just so everyone is caught up and on the same level. I think it's still highly problematic that the big, like, cosmic person who's on the side of the singers and listeners is a person quite literally titled hatred. I think we don't address this enough. I also don't think we address it enough that we keep coming back to the point of honor, despite being dead, lives on in the hearts of its children, which is exclusively used to refer to humans. I think we don't talk about this enough because it is a vast problem over the entirety of the series that at this point just majorly turns me off every single time it's mentioned because it is so fucked up. And it means that Brandon Sanderson keeps on mixing up every single one of his metaphors because, and this is something that I admit with a very heavy heart because at this point I'm so over it, honestly, but the entire story of Venli specifically, but also just in general of a lot of the, in this case specifically listeners, who have a problem with the singers, who have a problem with the fused, would be very interesting to address because I do think it is very interesting to address like different levels of revolution, for example, of people who might not be comfortable with direct negative or direct crucial martial action, people who want to live in peace, who maybe don't want to rebel outwardly. Again, this is something that a lot of books do, so at this point we might also have to point out that is very problematic.
Aside from that, like it's a real world example. There's so much conflict between like original and diaspora communities. I'm putting it like in quotes, but
yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Like, this would be such an interesting point to address, and especially in a book that directly gives us a lot of Venli POV chapters outside of interludes and flashbacks, right? Like, book 4 is where Venli really gets to shine. Unfortunately so, because her character is immediately and fully butchered. But, like, this would be such an interesting point to address, especially considering the fused, who are, like, these ancient spirits of reborn, reformed, and completely mad spirits of their ancestors, and, like, people who are not even in the ancestry of the listeners to begin with. And this would be so interesting to address as, like, these different groups that are still all unanimously oppressed, but have different ways of dealing with that and interacting with that. But instead, the problem is that we only ever get this from the listeners and singers' perspective, never from the humans. And that is the main issue of everything that's going on between the humans on one side and the listeners, singers, fused / whatever on the other side. And the problem with odium coming into the mix is it gets even more muddled because now everyone who agrees with even just the sentiment of, I think all listeners and singers should be free, seems to automatically agree to odium, who wants to put the entire planet into ruins. do we see the problem here?
And Venli and Relaine, I think, are the two characters who we get the most POV from as coming from that specific like demographic. And
Absolutely.
I think it needs to be noted that ultimately, I feel like Venli, starting with the whole map thing, right, but into other areas, is kind of primed along with Relaine to become these colonizer sympathizers and apologists at the end of the story, because we don't really get them addressing the problem or the war that's really happening in the background in a way that to me is very meaningful. I also need to ask for clarity because I was so confused with the listeners who were there somewhere in a chasm the whole time and waiting to come, and then they showed up at the end and it's like, we're here, we're ready to join and fight, and it's like, where is this coming from? Someone please explain.
The thing that was explained that there was, I think his name was Thude, who was like the friend or the mate or something of Eshonai. And Eshonai and Thude already, like, they were very unhappy with trying out storm form, and I guess, you know, they thought something might happen. And so when a lot of other people went into the storm and got storm form, Thude took like about 1,000, I think, of the listeners and like fucked off and hid. And then Raboniel found them again.
Yeah, and basically gave Venli the means to contact them, more or less. Yeah.
I feel like that's a pretty big thing that I would have liked to see at least foreshadowed at somewhere. Unless it wasn't, I completely missed it, because to me that just felt like it came out of left field.
That's fair.
Okay.
I think one more important character that we kind of have to talk about every now and then, if we start addressing the whole, like, what singers/listeners are so sympathetic to the humans, is what the actual hell is Leshwi's problem? Like, what is up with Leshwi as a character specifically? First of all, why is she so interested in humans, and specifically Kaladin? Second of all, why, towards the end of the book, is she so ready to oppose other listeners and singers and fused just so the humans can escape? And again, this is what annoys me about this so much, is Brandon Sanderson could have made an excellent point about how sometimes even your allies go too far, right? Like, he could have made such a good point about Leshwi going, okay, you know what? Killing innocent people, that's where I draw the line. Even though this is also such an incredibly muddled and mixed up message, but like, you know, whatever at this point. We're used to it. But like, we could have made such a good point specifically in that scene about what exactly it means to not necessarily agree with all of the actions that you take, even though you still want to see your people succeed. But with Leshwi, the most we get is, oh yeah, these humans are super interesting. I guess I'm not going to kill Kaladin, even though I could this entire time, because plot reasons.
What are the reasons? The problem there in the end was why she so easily turned and then helped the humans. I think the problem there is that we're never really explained what happened, why Honor abandoned the singers and went to the humans, and how the singers got to get together, like throw in a lot with Odium. Because the moment when Leshwi like changed allegiance was after Venli revealed herself as Radiant. Which was the point for her, where it was a lot like, oh, the Spren didn't abandon us. And there's Spren still out there, and it's too, I think she said something of, it's too late for me. Because Leshwi, I think, was like, she's one of the fused are the ones who have been there since the beginning, right? They probably even lived through the time, like not just when the Oath Pact was started, but also lived through the time when Honor abandoned them. And Leshwi is one of the last ones who's not mad, I guess. And so I guess the point was that she never really was okay with Odium. But she like just waited for a sign that Honor didn't fully abandon them, or that Spren are still with them or something. I guess. And like that was the whole thing why she then helped the humans in the end or something. I don't know. I truly don't know.
I love how all of this is us just so desperately trying to piece together what could have possibly been the reason.
I mean, does it tie back to Adeline's whole thing at the with the council and the court and the ruckus that he caused in the with the honor spren about making choices?
I don't think so, to be honest.
I don't know. I'm speculating. I don't know.
Because the thing is, there's currently only 9 orders of radiant, because there's this one this one type of spren that are refusing to bond humans. That is the type of spren that Venli has.
Oh.
That was the thing that came up a lot with Venli's spren, that these types of spren are extra angry and that they refuse to bond with humans. And that's why they're willing to give it a try and bond with singers or something.
Okay. That's so nice of them.
It was the children, elderly, and conscientious objectors who refused to take storm form who escaped at the end of book 2.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, now that's coming back to me, because was it book 2 or was it book 3 where there were people, I think it was, I don't know if it was Parshmen or if it was singers or who it was, who were talking to Fused, and the Fused were trying to get them to fight. And when they refused, the Fused asked them, like, why wouldn't you want to fight the people who enslaved you and who did this to our people? And their answer was, well, like, they're not all bad. Is that when that happened? I could be wrong. I'm literally asking.
I have no idea. There are so many horrible moments of like metaphors that get so completely mixed that they don't make sense anymore.
That moment was in book 3, where it's like,
book 3?
I guess they're not all bad.
Oh, that might have been it. See, like, I would like to reiterate, the reason we have such an issue with how this is treated specifically in terms of the singers and listeners is because this type of, like, I hesitate to call it nuance, but that's the best word that comes to mind. This type of nuance, this type of depiction of people having various different opinions on their oppressors or on the people who've harmed them would be interesting if the singers and listeners were not the only ones to have to carry that burden, because humans never have to in that extent. Like, there might be 1 or 2 moments where humans are like, well, damn, guess not all Parshmen were bad, or something like that. Or, well, damn, I guess it's kind of nice that the Parshendi are no longer slaves. Not even that happens, to be quite honest. I think the only person who thinks about this is like Moash. So, whatever, right?
Well, the other thing was also because obviously R'lyeh is the one that we have the most, and that's like, we don't have a single good listener or singer who is allowed to be angry at humans.
Yes.
Not a single one.
Yes.
R'lyeh in every single interaction with Kaladin, this book, and there were so many that were so annoying, the most he's allowed to do is be sad and resigned.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's exactly what I was going to say.
The time he's allowed to be angry is at Venli.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because
and again,
he's the one at fault.
Of course.
For the genocide of his people. It doesn't matter that humans have killed his people for 6 years before that.
No, that's not
still fighting.
And we're not even talking about like everything that happened before. We're talking specifically the thing that he knows within his lifetime of his community. His community has been killed by humans who have tried to eradicate them, who have vowed a pact to eradicate them, but he's not allowed to be angry at them.
Yes, and a perfect example, if I can add, is the scene where Kaladin actually does address what happened in book 1, where Bridge 4 had to use the carapace of the fallen war forms, I think it was, or singers or whatever, to disguise themselves when they were running the bridge, or to protect themselves, and how absolutely traumatic that was for R'lyeh. Like, we see him having this breakdown in book 1, and Kaladin finally, 3,000, almost 4,000 pages later, says, hey, I'm really sorry about what happened. That was messed up. And R'lyeh's response in that chapter is, it's all right. It's fine. We're doing what we needed to do. By the way, let's talk about your mental health. And it's like, can we just give him a moment to be angry?
It can't even
is not his own people.
It can't even be like, after a year, I understand it. I want to understand why you did it. But man, that was fucked up. That was really fucked up. And I need you to know that was really fucked up.
Yeah. Like, it's not even that.
You did it. Let's leave it at that. But I want you to know it's fucked up.
Yes.
And it's not even that. It is so incredibly sad. And the thing is, again, this is something that I just keep coming back to. There's so much potential in scenes like that as well, because of course we could make an argument about how it is quote unquote safer for R'lyeh to be angry at Venli, right? We could make an argument that maybe the reason he is so mad at Venli is because he's putting all of that anger that he feels towards humans, that he doesn't feel safe to express towards humans, into the one person he feels safe to quote unquote vent to, right? We could make a point that this is a very complex matter that he struggles with, where he doesn't know how to be angry at Kaladin, because Kaladin fundamentally as a person did help him, right? And as a person is trying to be his friend, is trying to be his partner and his ally, right? And how R'lyeh doesn't feel, first of all, safe to express his anger towards humans, and second of all, also doesn't really know how to express his anger towards Kaladin, one of the few humans who did try to show him some sort of friendship. And then he puts all of that onto Venli. But the problem is the book never addresses any of that in that way. The only thing it does is it makes R'lyeh excuse every single thing that Kaladin has ever done, that Kaladin has ever said, that humans have ever done or said to him. But the second Venli starts talking about how she was the one to discover the storm form, and how she was the one to put into motion that mad battle in the second book, where most of the listeners of her clan and R'lyeh's clan then subsequently got killed, that is where he gets to be angry. That is the only moment where R'lyeh gets to be angry in the book. And it makes no sense. And in fact, it is insulting towards everything that he and his people have been through.
And like, he should be able to be angry in that scene and also everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Like, okay, just let my boy be angry, okay?
Like, it feels so much like, and obviously, we're two very white bitches here, and one person who has more
I'm still a light-skinned, white-passing Latina, so it's okay.
You have more experience with racism than us. That's what I mean. And there's a lot of discussions why, for example, a lot of Black people just straight up don't have white friends, or don't want to have white friends, because they do a lot of what Kaladin is doing and put all of the work on the Black person, or on the BIPOC person, on the marginalized person, where it's like, tell me if I'm racist, tell me if something is wrong. You do know that I didn't mean that, right? And because they come to you and are like, I am sorry for doing that, the Black or brown person is most of the time expected to be like, yeah,
it's fine.
It's fine. Whatever.
It's not fine. It's not fine.
No, all the time. And by the way, I just need to push it a lot. I just need to push it a lot. This book does not do that. There's actually a lot of scenes where the main character does a very Kaladin thing to the indigenous side character.
Listen,
and
Sarah,
the indigenous
listen.
side character gets to be angry.
Listen, Sarah, Steph and I have already said that we're going to buddy read it next year, because we need buddy reads that don't make us miserable, okay? You've achieved your goal. Don't worry.
Yes, we want to do more critical reads of things and hopefully say some positive things at some point.
Please, yes.
So it says, I read at the end, the listeners are not helping the humans, but also not helping the fused. They're hiding away in their own society, away from the war. They view both sides as oppressors. Okay, I have something that I want to read real quick in relation to this, I think. So there's a note that I put here. It's a particular scene where I think Kaladin, it's when Urithiru has been like overrun by Raboniel and Raboniel's people. And so he's moving through the castle before everyone starts looking for him. It's like when he's able to kind of move around a little bit more freely and doing his surgeon business. And there is a singer that comes and is like bullying him, right? And that this page ends with, he held those red eyes with his own. He heard his heart thundering. When he forced himself to look away and let the singer shove him into the wall, then trip him with a sweep of his legs. The creature loomed over him, and Kaladin kept his eyes down. You learned to do that when you were a slave. And my annotation says, so Kaladin knows what it's like to be a parchman, because parchmen were also slaves, but we didn't get to see them being angry. We only got to see them like speaking up in favor of their oppressors.
Also, to be honest, though, that like that scene made me laugh so hard because it was just there to make the singer seem evil. Because genuinely, when did Kaladin learn that?
Right,
exactly.
Okay. The entire problem is that he never was able to keep his head down.
Right.
Exactly.
And I want to add to that, and like it made me think in comparison, like, okay, this is a scene where Kaladin is addressing the fact that he does have some kind of intersectional experience. Specifically, in this case, he is one of the few main characters who understands what it's like to exist in this caste system, but also to be a slave, right? And in book 1 or 2, maybe it was 2, I don't remember, but there's a particular scene where Moash is made to look as unreasonable because Light Eye Soldier was kind of bullying them in a way, saying like, dark eyes shouldn't be here, these are our training gowns, or something along those lines. And like, that to me was a scene that we had addressed previously as saying this needs to go a little bit deeper, because there is an intersectional experience here as Kaladin and Moash and all of them being brown eyes. But instead it kind of ends with Kaladin talking down Moash and saying like, oh, you know, like we need to prove that we are better. So it's like the way that these different scenes are written in which that character's specific identity becomes relevant or is pushed to the side for the sake of upholding this narrative that benefits other characters, Cough Cough Dalinar. It's the picking and choosing of relevancy that I just find very strange.
Absolutely. I think what's also really interesting to note, and I'm going to directly reference back to the comment of like the listeners choosing to just not be on human or fused side, there is an issue with that. And the issue is that consistently throughout the entirety of the first 3.5 books, more or less, up until this point, we have more or less been told that the humans are the good ones and the fused are the bad ones. And the reason this is such an issue is because presenting the listeners as people who just choose to not choose a side is the same thing that we keep coming back to in social justice, where it's like you cannot abstain from social injustice discussions by saying you just don't pick a side, because inevitably you're going to pick the side of the oppressor. And yes, sure, this is literature. It might not always be as serious as real life, you know, we're the first ones to admit that. However, there is a very distinct pattern here. But humans consistently get to be shown for all of their good sides, for all of their good intentions. Like every single human character gets to basically say, but I have good intentions. Shouldn't that matter too? We have it with Navani talking to the sibling. We have it with Adeline in his like in the honor spren trial situation. We have it with basically every single human character, and specifically every single light eyes human character, who get to consistently say stuff like, but these are our intentions, so shouldn't that matter too? Shouldn't we get judged upon what we want to achieve, not just on what we are achieving? And the fused never get that. Not a single one of them. The one that is seen most, I would say, neutral in a way is Leshwi, who immediately has to sympathize with basically every single human being she comes across, but specifically Kaladin, and who has to take advantage and basically be like, well, the Fused are kind of like doing a whole lot, so like I'm not on Raboniel's side, for example, because I don't think Raboniel is doing a whole lot, and it's not super great either. And the only other Fuse that we get to see a whole lot of is Raboniel, who also has to take humanity's side, specifically in aiding Navani against Moash, and then basically in the end being like, well, I want my people to win, but also I'm just tired of war in general, so let's just stop the fighting. Like, again, this would be a super interesting character trait to address, but this is never something that we address with the humans. Never.
And that's literally the problem with the whole thing, once again, with like having singers be with odium, because ultimately the only way that singers can win, or listeners, quote unquote, is by taking themselves out of the conflict, because either you have to have them side with one oppressor or with the other oppressor. Like, both humans and odium are bad for the singers.
Exactly.
However, the framing of the entire conflict is humans against odium.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only way you can have anything positive is by the singers taking themselves out, and listeners. Is it my time?
Okay, I need to add this caveat. Thank you, Josh, for dropping this, because I think maybe this is the nudge that we needed. So something that we talked about before coming on the live was that when it's time to talk about Lirin, that Sarah will take the mic. And so
I get the mic.
I'm going to change the banner. I've been trying to keep the banners relevant to the topic that we're on.
You're doing so great, Steff, because our topic hopping is insane.
So without further ado, to the podium, we have Sarah.
Lirin, background. Lirin is, in my opinion, the most interesting character in this specific book. Lirin is also the character that suffers the most from Sanderson not understanding ideologies and social constructs and themes. Because with Lirin, three things come together. First of all, he's a pacifist, and it becomes very, very apparent that that Sanderson does not understand what pacifism is, because pacifism a lot of times is an incredibly personal ideology. And a lot of pacifists, and even most pacifists that you'll meet in media, are not the type of people who will put their ideology on other people, but who will keep it to themselves. I'm actually incredibly interested. Let's see if I can find the book down here. I'm like, Scylla knows what I'm bringing up. No, that's not the right book. I have so many books. Here it is. One of my favorite German authors just brought out a new book, which is called Anti-Christi. She's a German author. She's Indian German, Mithusanya, and in this book she looks at the resistance movement in India in Great Britain concerning India in the first half of the 20th century, which then later on, like a lot of figures that become important later on in Indian resistance and like the freedom fight, like Gandhi, already play a role here. And specifically, it talks about the main character meeting like the counter figure to Gandhi, who I forgot the name of, but pre him becoming radicalized. And like I heard an interview with the author where she talked a lot about how she grew up kind of being taught that Indian resistance was one of the good ones because it was a pacifist movement under Gandhi. However, that wasn't true, and that's not the whole truth, because there was always also violent resistance in India, and without that violent resistance, the pacifist movement wouldn't have worked. And in fact, Gandhi also met with the leaders of the violent resistance. Just like, you know, in American civil rights movement, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King are often like put at these opposing figures, one like more violent than the other, and the one who's not violent is positive, the one who's violent is negative. However, that's like just a framing that we're taught, and in fact these two people did not work against each other, not necessarily.
Yes.
Anyway,
also, just so you know, for all the English speakers in the chat, not to worry, for the first book that Mito Sanyal dropped was translated into English, so there is a good chance that Antichristi is going to be translated as well, so you are probably going to be able to partake in it.
By the way, Antichristi, it's also because like part of the framing device is the filming of an Agatha Christie movie, so that's where Anti-Christie comes from.
Is it the 10 Little Indians one, or which one is it?
I don't know.
Doesn't matter, whatever.
Okay,
but
so
like the point is English speaking individuals are probably going to be able to partake in it because the first novel, Identity, was in fact translated. So
yeah. So anyway, so Lyrin is a pacifist character. However, he's not pacifist in the way that pacifism often is understood. I'm sure, like, as with all movement, there are extremists. I'm sure there's pacifists like Lyrin out there. However, with Lyrin and with his pacifism, it becomes extremely apparent that Sanderson just simply doesn't like him as a character, just as it becomes apparent with Moash, because he just has to have the most extreme, like, he has good points, quote unquote, but it always needs to be framed, phrased, or put into extremes in a way where, as a reader, it's like natural to disagree with him or to dislike him or whatever. Which obviously we don't, because we're smart people.
We tried so hard to not disagree with Lyrin. Listen, our entire chat has dedicated features to when one of us encountered a Lyrin scene and went, listen, we need to discuss how he has a point, regardless of everything else that's going on.
Yeah, and the other thing with Lyrin is that forms of oppression are just like really weirdly mixed up, because the main thing that Lyrin harps on is always how he's oppressed as a surgeon, which makes absolutely no sense. And I believe that's on purpose on Sanderson's part, so that the reader goes, you don't have a point, you don't have a reason to be angry at the world or to mistrust the world, when in fact the real oppression that Lyrin is under is that he's a dark eye, so he's racially oppressed. However, there once again, Sanderson mixes his coding and can't get behind whether or not dark eyes, light eyes is a class issue or whether or not it is a race issue, which we're not going to talk here about how race and class are mixed. Read, what's her name? Angela Davis. You'll get it, but you know.
Yes.
Just get yourself a copy of Freedom is a Constant Struggle. There you go.
Yes.
And then get Audre Lorde on top of that,
yes.
and then you're set for the beginning. All right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I will say that if you want to hear us talk more about that, we have talked about it in other videos. So
exactly.
Moving on.
And so there's like literally actually only one instance of acknowledging how Lyrin is actually oppressed, and that's at the very end. And that's also where he once again puts the blame on himself, because there's one very specific, yes, he has a lot of power within his village. He has enough power even as a Dark Eyes to where him openly showing dissent towards the new Bright Lord coming in actually kind of undermines the power of the Bright Lord. However, that does not mean that he has like proper power or that he can't be discriminated against, whether in race or in class, because if he actually had like actual political power and not just social power, he would have been able to save Tian. Tian was taken from him because he is brown coded, basically, or he is lower class coded, whatever you want to take it. But that is never acknowledged, and it's not even acknowledged at the very end of the book, where we get down to why Liren is even more pacifist than when we first meet him, because he literally says he blames himself. It's not that he believes in pacifism as in he is anti-violence. I mean, he was anti-violence, but he's like anti-resistance now, because if he hadn't resisted to the new leader in his town, he would still have Tien. And that's kind of framed as him being almost correct, quote unquote, because Rashon also gets like this really weird rehabilitation at the beginning of the story. I don't think we're even going to talk about it in this video because we do not have time. But
I would just like to notice that was so fucking confusing, and I still don't know what the purpose of that was. Continue.
But it's so messed up that you have in Liren, once again, a deeply traumatized character whose trauma is not properly acknowledged, because the only thing that he ever gets to do is put down Kaladin, and we don't like that, and say that people who fight deserve it, actually. Which, by the way, wouldn't be how he would react. Like, it would be valid to be like, don't they understand that they'll make it worse for themselves? Because that is something that, like, let's say it as it is. Resistance is extremely necessary, but resistance takes an extremely long time to work. And 90% of the time, until it works, resistance probably, on a personal level, will end up biting you in the ass.
Resistance is not without consequence, especially for those that are marginalized.
Exactly.
But it's not the fault of the people who are marginalized and who are resisting. And I think it would have been so interesting to explore that more fully. But because Sanderson doesn't like Liren, we never get that. Anyway, I'm done. I think.
I feel like that's one of the main things that we just keep saying is like, this could have been so interesting, but we didn't. This would have been a great setup, but we didn't.
But we didn't.
And it's like, that is the unfulfilling part of all this. And it's like, at the end of the day, Sanderson is throwing in everything but maybe plus the kitchen sink into this like series, and I don't know how he's ultimately going to resolve all of these things in a way that is satisfying. But I just have to say that for me as a reader, it's like, I firmly believe that I should not have to wait until book 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, whatever, to finally get a hint of what direction you might take, or if you plan on returning to any of these issues that have been established in a way that's actually going to create some sort of like meaningful narrative, right? I'm not saying that you have to have a solution to slavery at the end of book 10, right? I'm not saying that all of those things are just gonna like go away, because they take generation. It's a generational problem, right? I'm not saying that you have to have an issue, a resolution to all of these things, but you have to have your characters talk about it. You have to have it be relevant. You have to have like some direction of something having a consequence with these systems that have been established. And it's taken this long. I cannot even tell you how many of these tabs are just me saying like, oh, finally, someone said the thing that I've been thinking since book 1. So I know that he is conscious of the different, things that he's weaving together in order to create this narrative. But I have more reason to distrust that it's going to resolve in a way that's satisfying than to trust.
And again, like, I am fine with having like extremely complicated characters as main characters or not good characters. I am even fine with like rooting, quote unquote, for characters who may be pro-slavery, because fiction, in my opinion, is allowed to be complicated and it's allowed to be complex. And in fiction, you're allowed to sometimes love fucked up characters. However, it is for me a bare minimum, an absolutely bare minimum, to not have the character be pro-slavery, where narratively in your story so far, you have had it that at this point currently, at this point where they're at, in the story so far, they have always been the one with the right judgment.
Yes. I do also want to very quickly put another author to the forefront of people's minds who handled issues like that a lot better, because I feel like at this point we are kind of owed that to the fantasy community. Joe Abercrombie. So first of all of his characters are shit, and they know it more often than not. But second of all, I'm specifically talking about his second trilogy, which I know Sarah, for example, still really wants to read, and I'm very excited for you to get to it. But basically, to very, very briefly summarize it, in the second trilogy, we get a lot of like class struggles. We have feelings that are equivalent to the feelings during the French Revolution, for example. We have basically almost the entire cast, I think bar like maybe 2 people or something, are from the elite. And one of them, who is one of my favorites because she's horrible, is Savine Dunglocta, who is, first of all, a woman, second of all, in power, and third of all, a very good like mix up of she's a woman, so she is oppressed, but also she is in power, and she also directly owns what we now would call sweatshops.
Mhm.
And there's a whole thing where, for example, she wants to create broadsheets to present herself as a savior of the masses, and she very explicitly says that this is to control the masses. Like, she does this for propaganda reasons. But the way Joe Abercrombie presents these things is going, see, my character is doing a very fucked up thing. And that is the key difference to what is happening with Brandon Sanderson. Because Brandon Sanderson consistently portrays characters who've made horrible moral judgments as the moral integrity and the moral backbone of the entire series. One of the main contenders for that is Dalinar, but Navani also takes the cake in this particular session, especially with her conversations with the sibling. And just in general, so many of the human characters, as opposed to the singers and listeners and fused characters, do this over and over again. And as I said, the muddling of having the singers and listeners be on Odium's side absolutely does not help, because if the godlike entity who is on humanity's side is called honor, and the godlike entity who is on the side of the singers and listeners is called hatred, there's a very clear coding situation going on here. And if you do not address that, you implicitly agree with it. And that's the problem.
And again, addressing doesn't have to mean like...
Yeah, like you don't have to
evil.
Be preaching.
This character is evil. Do you know this character is evil? Like, that's not what we mean with addressing.
No. Like, for example, as I said, I love Joe Abercrombie as an author. He never does that. He basically lets you make the judgment yourself, but he is implicit in his meaning, and it is fairly easy to catch that and catch him going, hey, by the way, supporting my characters who are doing morally fucked up things after a certain point is slightly questionable at the very least. But Brandon Sanderson is not even doing that, and that is the problem.
And like, the thing is also, it's fine if you're a reader who wants to do the legwork. Like, go ahead. Do it.
Yeah.
If you're fine with it being addressed after 10 books, that's on you. If you think it's like, if you read it differently than us, that's the beauty of literary analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I am gonna say we do have the type of literary analysis. We're not doing it in these videos because, I mean, I did it a little bit in the last video.
I'm so proud of you for that.
We come with the, pointing towards the text. That's fine. Which, by the way, I saw a really interesting video recently talking about canon and how that gets mixed up nowadays a lot. How people assume that canon is everything that an author said about the book. No, canon is just text. And that's what we mostly talk about.
Yes.
Exactly. Which is also why Renarin and Verlaine aren't together here.
We'll talk about that's a book 5 issue.
Very quickly. There was not 4 books. There wasn't a single interaction on page between them.
Nope.
Not a single
It was
one.
basically just Renarin saying, oh yeah, I sent Toomey because I thought he would fit Verlaine. That's it. That's what we're working on in this book. And like, I've shipped characters for weirder things, but like,
We're not talking about shipping.
Exactly, because shipping is fanon work, and that's what you do yourself. And I am done doing the heavy lifting for authors. I'm not going to praise an author for a representation that's not there because I made it up. Okay, that is the first rule of fandom. If you have to make it up yourself, you do not crawl up the author's ass. Okay, done.
Yes, I have a whole issue with the adding to the narrative based on what fandom has gotten to the trending section of any social platform, but that's going to be a book 5 conversation for me. Okay.
Maybe even a 6th live show conversation at this
Yes.
point, to be honest.
Yes. Issues with the Parshendi, that the Parshendi are non-human.
Oh, I do want to talk about that actually, just very quickly. I fucking hated how, aside from the Shane Im, so the Heavenly Ones, which it took like 5 Venli chapters to mostly consistently call them Shane Im. Venli almost only used the exonyms for the different fused groups.
Didn't we have an similar issue like that in the past with Rock and Rock's language?
Rock,
Yes. It is a consistent issue because Sanderson consistently fucks it up. And the thing is, you know, as avid fantasy readers, we understand that sometimes you want to be on one level with your audience. You don't want to hit them over the head with 25 different names, especially considering that, to be fair, the Stormlight Archive starts with the human perspective and then very slowly starts, you know, integrating singers, or to be fair, mostly listener perspectives with Shonai, Venli, and then later on Verlaine. So we are aware that the endonyms, aka the names that the singers, listeners, etc. call themselves, are coming way later than what the humans call them. Okay, whatever. But there's not even an attempt. There's not even an attempt in the characters' POV chapters to do something different and to try and trust the audience that they're going to figure out the weird, quote-unquote, new fantasy names themselves. There is nothing, and that is upsetting.
Mm-hmm. Also, not gonna lie, like, I think we got for the second fuse group that we get a name that is used like once, and it's very, very similar in the naming convention to Shane Im. We get Shane Im the first time in a human perspective. So we get Shane Im called the Heavenly Ones. It means the Heavenly Ones, yada, yada. So we have that established in a human chapter. We then get Venli talking about the Heavenly Ones really long before going to Shane Im. And to be honest, for me as a reader at that point, I would be completely fine if it's like somewhat the similar naming convention to just use that other naming within her chapters, because, like, I'm sorry, readers are smart. We can figure out that that's another group of fused.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like I don't have, this is one of those things where I don't have trust in that being used correctly, because just going and thinking about the Ardents and how the Ardents are not supposed to have gender associated with them according to Alethi standards, and yet they cannot help but be gendered in every conversation, or that the gender of female Ardents constantly be brought to the forefront of a conversation. Like, well, we already established in book 1 that it's not supposed to be relevant, so why is it still relevant? But we're not going to even talk about the gender
Brandon
system.
Sanderson does not know how to use his metaphors consistently, not even about gender.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is really messy because Dalinar consistently gets called, like, brave and something for learning to read. And he's like really, really great because he's, you know, messing up gender norms. Whereas narratively, and like, of course, there's like backlash to Dalinar, but he's never narratively punished for doing that. Yasna is.
Yes. This is the whole thing. This is the whole thing that I would like to very, very quickly talk about as well, is the fact that despite everything that some people seem to pretend, misogyny very much exists in Stormlight Archive.
Yes,
Can we agree to that, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. Can we now agree that misogyny is the entire reason for Navani's arc?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. And can we also furthermore agree that it is complete bullshit to present Navani as this figure who so desperately wants to be a scholar when the entire point of being a scholar is that you can read, which means the entire point should be that it is normal for a woman to be a scholar. And in fact, if we wanted to talk about gender-specific discrimination, we should talk about how scholars are not like honored in a society, specifically a Lethe society, that is based on war. But that is not the case with Navani. Navani specifically gets told that she's not smart enough to be a scholar by her own husband. And that is the main point for her arc, which makes no goddamn sense. And I'm not saying that discrimination should make sense, because discrimination in the real world also doesn't make sense. I feel we've added that disclaimer to every single video, but can we please unpack that with Navani? Because it's been bothering me from the very second that arc was introduced.
I don't think it's supposed to be a gender thing, like in world though. I think it's just because she's like a stupid noble or something.
Because like it makes no sense.
She has a lot of I don't get why Navani supposedly isn't allowed to be a scholar, aside from having a husband who, by the way, isn't worse to her than Dalinar was to Evie. But okay.
We talked in the last live show about Dalinar and his depiction as like somehow a better partner to Navani versus Gavilar, and yet like sure, we're just gonna totally put to the side that he was abusive to Evie. We're not gonna go back there. Anyway, I want to address this comment really quickly. Thank you for saying this. I think that the reason that like even if that is the case, I think that it's still it's not enough, is because the main characters and the POVs that we get, the way that the story is still ultimately framed is that these characters who are siding with honor, who are doing the honorable things, the moral things, the logical things, are ending each chapter on the moral high ground and are human.
Yes. And I think one thing very quickly to mention to that as well is this is my main issue, as I said, with how the book, specifically book 4, is structured. The whole aspect of humans siding with Odium as well, humans fighting against Dalinar, which apparently is now, synonymous with fighting against honor. That's a whole other thing we can go about in just a second. But like the main problem I have with this is that it is basically mentioned more or less in passing. Like the main human, or the main humans plural in all fairness, that we have that side with Odium are Taravangian. I struggled with the name for a second. I was about to say Thydakar, and I was like, that's not correct. That's someone else entirely. Hold up. Different T name. So the main humans we have that ally themselves with Odium in some way or another are Taravangian, who also oscillates between being a character who kind of has a point and a character who is being stupid for stupid's sake, because we need someone to take the blame for being the villain of the scene, and Moash. We talked about Moash enough. Taravangian doesn't need a whole lot of like introduction, but these two are the main humans who side with Odium. Everything else that the Truth and the Skybreakers. Under Nail, right?
They don't side with Odium, they side with the singers. There's this whole thing
right.
between Seth and Nale at the end of the third book where it's like the singers are the original people of the land, so theirs are the laws that we should follow.
Yeah. And like the problem specifically that I'm trying to get at is that this entire issue of some part of humans siding with Odium is always reduced to individuals. And the part where it's not reduced to individuals, aka where entire civil wars break out, is basically brushed aside and or just very briefly mentioned that, oh yeah, we're fighting against a whole other kingdom right now, by the way, which is then a kingdom that we've never heard about before or just heard about in super passing. So we are not invested in it whatsoever, and we have no idea what exactly is going on because Brandon Sanderson is not showing us what's going on. But it is very important for him to consistently point out that the Fused are basically allied with Odium, which makes them into hateful beings who could not possibly be Knights Radiants, because Knights Radiants are supposed to be the good guys. And that is the crux of the problem.
I feel like this might be a good segue into Adolin. The court of
the court of Adolin.
The court of, oh dear God, Freudian slip. Man, I'm looking for my notes.
First of all, let's once again say Adeline still is somehow the most consistently characterized character.
Yes.
Like
it's very unfortunate because in book 4 he's part of scenes that we do not agree with whatsoever, but like he is the most consistent character in how he reacts to scenes. It is unfortunate in the case of how he reacts to everything that concerns Dalinar, because if Brandon Sanderson had any kind of spine, he would let Adeline be angry. But apart from that, Adeline is consistently the character who is like true to himself, quote unquote, the most, I feel like. Like he's just like that for real, you know?
Oh, perfect example, what I just got to.
I was about to say, Stefan's very desperately looking through her notes right now.
I'm looking for my notes. I think who is Adeline talking to in this scene? Who is she? Is he talking to
Lyndon?
Is it that
Kellic? I think he's talking to Kellic in this scene.
Oh.
And he's asking Blended says humans are not from this. You are invaders, and bonds with you are not natural. Adeline says, you side with them, our enemies. Why not, she said, strolling across the stage. They are the rightful heirs of this land. They have been pushed to desperation by your kind, but are no less reasonable or logical. Perhaps your kind would do better to acknowledge their rule. They serve odium, Adeline said. Men might be changeable, yes. We might be corrupt at times and weak always, but I know evil when I see it. Odium is evil, and I will never serve him.
This is my entire point. This was my entire point where I went onto like a 5-minute rant in the Discord specifically.
And literally the next sentence is Blended eyed the crowd who who nodded at Adeline's words. She gave him a little nod herself, acknowledgement of a point earned. That's not a point. What do you mean?
The thing with the trial also, though, I mean, okay, we can start with the whole thing of like he's put on trial that he cannot be judged by the mistakes of his forefathers or whatever.
Yes.
However, I do not understand why that then always leads to arguments why Spren should or should not bond men and women. Because, like, even if the end of the trial is, okay, we cannot judge you, Adeline, by the crimes of your forefathers, and because of that, like, I mean, the argument is messy already. We cannot judge one person by what happened to the forefathers, so we cannot judge anyone by what happened with the forefathers is, like, messy argument at best, you know? But, like, even if you're judged quote-unquote innocent, there's still plenty of reasons why Spren wouldn't want to maybe bond with humans.
Like literal genocide?
And again, this is where I specifically went off in the Discord. I vividly remember that. Which is like the whole argument is flawed in and of itself. Because none of it consistently makes sense whatsoever. But like this is the whole issue with having Odium be essentially the quote-unquote flagship of the fused singers and listeners, right? Because the entire point in this conversation that what's her name, the Spren's name, what's her name,
Blended.
Yes, that one. The entire point that she's trying to make is that bonding with humans is unnatural because humans were the ones to come latest to Roshar. And again, this would be a very interesting talking point if we started to acknowledge the fact that humans are not indigenous to Roshar and that humans came to Roshar way later, and so that it also just makes no goddamn sense that the entirety of Spren society seems to be modeled after humans, even in terms of clothing that they wear. That's a whole different point, but it relates to all of that because the way Adeline sees the world is through fashion, which, you know, good for him. Pop off, bestie. But, like, it makes no sense. It makes no sense that the Sprens are so closely modeled after human society, whatever. But, like, the whole point in this argument that is being made is that bonding with humans is unnatural because humanity was not there when Russia was created. This is also a point that gets consistently brought up with the, like, rhythms that Navani and Raboniel are going through, which we're probably going to get to after this, because I feel like that's a good segue to Navani and Raboniel and the issues we have there, which are a lot. specifically me, I'm talking about myself here. But like the entire argument that keeps being brought up by people who we are not supposed to agree with, which is the big point, is that humanity is not native to Roshar, and thus Spren's bonding with humans is not natural. And humans in general do not fit with the nature of Roshar itself. And then that point gets consistently rebutted by some of the human characters by basically going, well, but I'm not like that, so what do you have to say about that? And it gets so tiring because we are so close to making an interesting argument. And yes, of course, we could then have the discussion about the fact that humans have been on Roshar for a very long time. Like, I do not have the timeline in mind because I don't want to pay attention to the timeline anymore. I am so tired of everything that's going on, but I'm pretty sure it's been like millennia, it feels like, of humans existing on Roshar. So we
I
could.
think the last desolation was like 4,000 years ago or something.
There we go. Okay. So it's been like aroundish 4,000 to 5,000 years, which is approximately as many years it has taken off my lifespan to read this series again. But basically, we could then start making an argument about how humanity at this point is kind of native to Roshar, which to an extent, even though very clumsily, is what's happening with Navani and Raboniel, where we figure out the different rhythms of Roshar and whatnot. And so there was a perfectly valid moment for Brandon Sanderson to start the very flawed and very complex argument of nativity and belonging to a place and being able to earn your place TM. But the way it is brought up specifically in this discussion is to basically silence every single Spren who has understandable issues with bonding with humans again, because they're like, you humans quite literally apparently killed all of our honor Spren at some point. So could we maybe address the fact that you humans are quite literally responsible for Spren genocide? But no, the point gets completely brushed aside because, well, but we can't discriminate against humans based on their nativity or not. Because, like, Adeline is not like this, and like, that's not the point.
Just keeps missing the point. I'm still looking
every
for
single
more.
time. You're doing great, Steff. I'm very proud of you.
Oh, gee, thanks. I also missed some comments. Yeah, addressing 100 page later is not enough.
Exactly.
For me. It just
Exactly.
isn't. Yes.
And like the thing is, I personally feel like it is fine-ish in a way to say like, hey, this gets addressed in later books because, as we've said, sometimes characters need to grow. Sometimes we start from a fundamentally flawed perspective and we start interrogating this more often. But again, I would like to reiterate, we are currently on book 4, with 2 more novellas being published in there as well. We are over 5,000.
Man apparently also belongs in there. Apparently,
I've not read this. I don't
read it before book 5. I only found out recently.
Well, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna figure out if we could read book 5 without Sunlit Man, and if we can't, then Brandon Sanderson has fundamentally failed as a writer. But my point is, we are over 5,000 pages in at this point. 5,000 pages is where a lot of fantasy series have ended approximately 3,000 pages ago. You cannot tell me that Brandon Sanderson does not have time to address something like this, like in any consistent matter throughout those 5,000 pages he's had. I think at some point you need to call it quits and be like, this author is either never going to do this anymore, or when he does it, it will be far too late. And also, this is the point I've reached with Brandon Sanderson.
Josh, I'm very sorry to disappoint you, but we will also not read it after book 5.
It's not happening. Love you, no.
We adore you. You can give us the summary in the Discord if you want to, but we are not going to put ourselves through that.
Nation's Eerie Riverside with Odium, who we still don't. I don't even remember who that is.
I remember Eerie.
I'm so proud of you, Sarah, because Steff and I clearly just conked out that conversation.
Should read it.
The thing I have a problem with specifically with the trial is how it concerns Spren. And I'm sorry if I make no sense at all right now, because to be honest, all the themes and coding inside the book didn't make sense to me as well. And maybe we can, unless Steff finds what she wants to find, then segue to Navani, because see, with the Spren, there's like two things. You have the Spren that are bonded to humans. You have nature Spren, I guess, an emotional Spren and whatever.
That are also kind of like referred to as less than animals in the Spren world. So that's
you
a whole
have the
different
dead
thing that's
eyes.
really strange.
And the dead eyes thing is like really weird, because on one hand it's like portrayed as very positive, that like the honest Spren take care of the dead eyes and they don't just like leave them. But with the point that Maya then makes, it then suddenly takes on a shift of very paternalistic and like taking away Deadeye's agency, and especially with what that one Spren does with Maya, where he basically makes her suffer to make his point and whatever, which I think is fine. And you can have both things in a society, right? You can have the people who are more complicated or more evil or whatever, and you can have the people who genuinely care, which obviously a lot of the Spren do, because a lot of the honest Spren are very uncomfortable with what happened to Maya.
Yes.
However, when Maya starts to speak, it then turns it into, actually, generally, you're all wrong about Deadeyes, and you've been taking away Deadeye's agency all along. Because Spren and humans made the choices, which, by the way, was a good question that was then never answered. I think Blended then said, like, yeah, but if the Spren also made the choices to break the bonds, why the fuck should we start bonding humans again? Last time, we all unanimously made the decision, this is a bad thing. Why should we start doing it again?
It's this thing again where Brandon Sanderson prioritizes personal feelings of characters over the entire point of the discussion that we've had in the first place. Like, I personally think it is fine that Maya gets her say and that we learn that maybe the Spren shouldn't have treated the Deadeyes as like people who are fully unable to make decisions just because they don't talk kind of situation. That's a fine enough messaging as it is, but it is basically presented as this complete turning point of the trial, where afterwards the entire trial is just null and void. None of the complaints that people have had and the concerns that Spren have had about bonding humans are important anymore, because, you know, one Spren said, oh, by the way, we chose the genocide of our people.
To be fair, though, I think in general the Deadeyes are like murky as fuck, because we do not have any other like proof aside from Maya that, like, because it's not that Deadeyes don't talk, it's that they're literally catatonic.
Yes,
they don't do anything.
Like it is remarked upon over and over again.
Shard blade around in the real world. That's like how they're described until
like with
Maya.
with pattern Spren. Like, what are they called again? What is pattern as a Spren again?
Is it the cryptid?
Yeah. Like with the cryptids, the fact that their like patterns don't move anymore and stuff like that, which is like the defining feature of Patton, capital P, as a character, is that he's like constantly in motion and stuff like that. Like the Deadeyes are not just, we don't want to talk to people anymore. They have been damaged beyond repair in a way, right?
And I'm sorry, you can't tell me that when the recreants happened, that it wasn't like when all those Deadeye came up that Spren were like, oh, I guess they're Deadeyes now, and just left them alone. And that no one until Adolin ever thought of like talking to them and taking them seriously. Like, anyway.
It's such a patronizing perspective on the whole thing again, right?
That then gets also weirdly conflated is the whole thing with the sibling and Navani and your enslaving Spren, which is really hard to deal with, because it's like there has so far been not a single instance shown that like Spren have any type of conscience, right? And sure, you can talk about, you know, putting Spren in for Bryles isn't the right way to go about things, because I don't know, they're like animals and a small cage doesn't help them. Whatever. Like, you can do that. You don't have to have it be literal slavery.
But that's what he does.
To be with humans, it's
no, but that's what he does, right? So okay, I found one annotation during that whole Adeline scene. I'm going to tie it into the sibling in a second. But so Adeline, I think he's at the stand or whatever. He's in the court. And he's criticizing them for what they're saying. And he says, if you can call it justice, Adeline said, to punish a man for what his ancestors did. And the annotation that I put is every time he says this, because he has said it multiple times, it feels like a white person angry for not being trusted by a person of color for having racist ancestors. But at the same time, he's not showing allyship. He has done nothing to demonstrate that he can be trusted. And to reinforce that.
Except he does, because Maya or whatever and the other friend don't do that.
No. And then there is actually a scene. I literally came across the annotation a few minutes ago. I should have kept it. But literally the sibling says to Navani, because Navani's like, oh, you should bond with me. And the sibling's like, but you enslaved us. I don't trust you. And that never comes back. Navani's like, oh, well, I guess I'll work on it. Right. And eventually it's like they bond. Okay, whatever. But what happened to that? That's still important.
This is so important to me as well, because like that's one of the scenes I quite literally read, like I feel like an hour before the live show or something. But like specifically, yes. First of all, absolutely that. But second of all, to return to the Navani sibling situation. So it is specifically that after she bonds the sibling, after Navani becomes the second bondsmith in existence to have bonded one of the great Spren, right? We get a point where the sibling basically says like, well, but you still haven't told me what you're going to do about the Spren and the Febriles. You still haven't told me what you're going to do about that. And she basically legitimately tells them, yeah, we're just going to work on it. That is legitimately something that she says after the bonding has happened. After. And also, I think, in a way, it is perfectly adequate to say, like, the bonding between Navani and the sibling was an absolute, like, it needed to happen immediately. It was very pressing because the sibling was about to get destroyed or corrupted by that weird, like, odium's light. What's it called in English? Yeah, void light. Yeah. Exactly. Thank you. So, like, it was very pressing. Things were happening super, super fast, whatever. But, like, you're not even trying, Sanderson, to try and like solve the biggest conflict between the sibling and Navani ever since they started talking. Because the reason the sibling starts talking to Navani in the first place is telling her to stop enslaving Spren and putting them into Febriles. And within over 1,000 pages, you haven't managed to at least try to give us a solution to that, Brandon Sanderson. It is so disappointing every single time that happens, because for some reason I still have hope, and then you just I don't know, stick my hope up my own ass. I don't know what's happening, but it's bad.
And by the way, both bondsmiths got their Spren, if we put it like most positively, under duress.
Yeah basically, like, yes.
The sibling did not want to bond Navani. But instead of it being like actually a really tragic situation of the sibling basically choosing something that they did not want to do, like they did not want to bond Navani, we get a girl boss moment, journey before destination, you bastard, or something.
God, it's so annoying. It's so annoying.
We've talked extensively, I think, in the past about Dalinar's questionable diplomacy. Just vibes is right. That's how we feel.
Okay, you know what? Let's just switch over to Navani and Rabonio, because I have issues.
Okay.
I have things to say. Okay, so first of all, this might not at first seem related to Navani, but this is something that I've noticed, again, consistently about Brandon Sanderson's like writing style and how he tries to approach the Stormlight Archive, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. Once again, it's just that with everything behind it, it becomes a bad thing because it means he ignores everything that is happening systemically in favor of personal issues. So the entire arc of Navani as a person, specifically in book 4, which is also why she is the person to show us the prologue, aka Gavilo's death again, right? Because this is something that narratively, at least to me, makes sense. The entire point of book 4 is that basically we see Navani's journey as a character. which is also why she is the one to narrate the prologue to us. Okay, I'm on board so far. This is where you lose me, though, Brandon Sanderson, because you keep making everything about a personal issue with Navani, which is just not how anything works. And this very clearly becomes a problem even towards the end of the book when the actual action is already done. Because there's multiple scenes with Dalinar specifically where he is a absolutely horrible general of war, might I add, where he basically says something like, well, we need to save Orithira, though, because hope needs to be kept alive, which I don't know what Orithira has to do with hope, but apparently we're going there now. But then towards the end of the book, when the entirety of the book has been the journey of Navani basically being like, no, you know what? I am smart. I can be a scholar, which again, makes no goddamn sense, but whatever at this point. But there's a very specific moment towards the very end of the book where Dalinar apologizes to Navani for leading his troops to Orithira, basically saying, like, I should have known that you had everything under control from the inside. No, you should not have! None of this makes sense in a tactical sense. None of this makes sense in a personal sense. First of all, that. Second of all, Dalinar, you yourself were never a person to put Navani down, period. That is the one thing I will give you, is that from the moment Navani entered the picture, you, Dalinar, saw her as more or less an equal. Yes, there was the, like, alpha protective man vibe that I got from you every now and again, but that's just standard at this point. I don't even care about this anymore. But you yourself have never put down Navani. You've put down your original wife, Evie, which we talked about in the Third Life show, but you haven't put down Navani. So why on earth are you apologizing on page for something that she should have been able to handle when what she was supposed to handle was the tower being under control of a fused so ancient, even Leshwi is afraid of her? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And the only reason it makes sense for Brandon Sanderson is because this is, again, the biggest proof that his entire writing for the Stormlight Archive is person-based and not narrative-based. And I will keep hammering this point down until everyone understands what I'm talking about. It makes no sense for Dalinar to say this. None!
The last line we get from Navani is like, it's good to hear someone say that about Dalinar, saying
Why?
she's incredible.
I hate it.
Why? Why is this a thing? Also,
and like yes,
we said this probably before you came into the live, but I know we definitely addressed this already today. It's just it's ridiculous.
It just makes no sense whatsoever. And the thing again is, like, on my first read, I was one of the people who was like looking at Raboniel and Navani and being like, okay, hold on, I kind of see the vision of like evil lady versus not so evil lady, and then we just put them together and we have a sapphic ship. Not saying that Brandon Sanderson intended any of that, by the way. That's me. That's all me and my delusional brain, okay? But the thing that I would like to very quickly address is the fact that every single time Navani and Raboniel talk to each other, every single time Navani gets to have like this super big scientific like experience TM, Raboniel has to be like, oh my god, I never thought about this before. Like,
Can I also just say one quick thing that I thought about after we got the information that Sanderson like basically audience checked his ending for Win and Truth?
Yes.
I bet the reason why Raboniel got like was good in the end and helped Navani was because that checked really good with audiences.
Yeah.
Listen,
you know what? I am willing to put my signature under that theory as well. You're so right.
There is toxic. There is a specific scene in which, first of all, there's like multiple scenes. I think there's at least 3 different instances in which Navani teaches Raboniel something, even though Raboniel is like, how old? Millennia? Hundreds? Millennia? I don't fucking know. A lot, right?
Like, but I'm pretty sure the entire point is that she's one of the, like, maybe not the oldest, but she is one of the oldest fused currently in command of the army. I'm pretty sure.
Right.
So, old.
There is a point where Navani is explaining binders to Raboniel, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, the most basic of shit. And how we're having this conversation after, when in, I think it was book 2, that who was it Eshonai, I think, who was still around at the time, someone correct me if I'm wrong, that they were trying to learn how to make art because they wanted to make art that was as good as
that was
humans.
one of the flashbacks from Eshonai's perspective in book 2. Yes,
right, okay, so they were painting in book 2.
Yes,
but one of their oldest leaders has never heard of a binder before.
I mean, there was a whole thing where Boniel was like, humans are so amazing. Last time we left you, you were using sticks and stones, and now you have gotten ahead of us in terms of innovation and technology.
I cannot express how viscerally upset I become every time we have an indigenous character say how amazing the colonizing people are, or the invading people are, for their technological or artistic advancements, as if they've never had culture.
And the thing again here, right? I would like to put this again as a disclaimer. I don't necessarily mind that Navani has interesting ideas that Raboniel never considered before. The entire point of science is to meet with people who have different perspectives than you do, and to enhance and, correct your vision, and to have discussions about that.
Tell scientists that they don't know that.
Listen. Let's not open that kind of words right here.
I'm trying to read this particular scene right now between Navani and Raboniel. I think it's the one where they synchronize the rhythm of war with the other rhythm. And my annotation says, you're telling me this entire time that no singers thought to try this?
Yeah, see, that's the point that I'm trying to get across here. Like, again, in theory, I don't mind Navani having different ideas than Raboniel. I do think, in fact, that this might be, again, would have been a very good moment for Brandon Sanderson to show that, humans do have their innovative ideas, and that is really cool, and that to a certain degree, if we all just got along, we would have been super good in our scientific advancements, because that is to an extent very true of actual science in this world as well. However, once again, the person who consistently has to say, oh yeah, you know what, I was wrong, you were right, this is so interesting and cool, is the Fuse, who has been alive for over a millennia at this point. And I need all of us to agree that that is a very, very bad thing to consistently put into your books, where you consistently portray the native population of Rashar, especially the part of the native population who have been alive for centuries and longer at this point, as the stupid barbarians who don't even know that oil and water can in fact mix to make paint. Please. Why are we like this? Why?
I'm just angry right now. I'm squishing my...
You're just putting all of your rage into that movement. I get you.
On the literal next page, I have this one sentence that I highlighted that says, Gavilar, king, husband, occasional monster, had been searching for a way to kill a god. And I'm like, that would have been important to know
before that point.
But the only reason that he's being called a monster now is because we have current husband to contrast him with. So even when Dalinar's not in the room, we're still kissing his ass.
And also the only reason that Gavilar is called a monster in this scene specifically is because he's been a monster to Navani, which again ties back into my whole complaint about the fact that Brandon Sanderson is only able to make this about personal issues every single time it matches. He is so consistent in that. I love it. Oh god, it's such an issue.
It is an issue. Oh, what's this one? I'm just kind of jumping around my own annotations at this point.
I was about to say, at this point, Steph is just going through all of her tabs like, oh yeah, this is something I also didn't like.
So many. What's this one? It's like, it feels like Christmas. It says, It
That's
says
a
he
shitty
wanted,
Christmas stuff.
right?
Jesus.
Oh, I think it's Relaine. He wanted to be seen as a person, not a symbol. The closest he'd come had been among the men of Breach 4, even though they named him Shen of all things. That was like naming one of their children human. But for all their faults, they had succeeded in giving him a home. Basically, they'd been willing to try to see him for himself. And I said, when did they do that? You were a literal slave, and the only one who saved you was Kaladin. So why is this like, all humans are great? No, Kaladin's your friend. What are you talking about?
So long to understand that the reason, I don't remember if that was actually in the book or if I was just stupid and overread it, but the reason they call him Shen is because of Parshendi. It took me so long to get there, and after that I was like, oh boy,
which he doesn't even address as being an issue.
Nope, he never does.
Finished my octagon. That's how long we've been.
Yay! Oh, it's so cute.
Listen, that is the good thing that comes out of this live show. The fact that
literally. I'm sorry, that was just very quick.
No, you should share the joy of the moment, because we're not going to be joyful for anything else in this live show, so we might as well appreciate your octagon. So,
No.
Now I just need... How many more?
I would like to add, by the way, that at this point I've ingested more than half a bottle of vodka, so this is how I'm doing on like a spiritual level.
Who we need to worry?
We all have our coping mechanisms.
I'm still not done with my one glass of G&T.
Listen, sometimes it just be like that for real. Okay, but like, is there anything else we need to talk about specifically when it comes to Navani and Carboniel? Because I feel like we've covered the gist of it, which is that I am incredibly annoyed, and so is everyone else.
I'm still never over that one scene in a previous book where Navani said that she likes war camps because they're
yes,
war camps are fun, Tim. Haha.
Because they're so organized.
Oh my god,
they're so straightforward.
That
was a whole thing.
So mad.
Okay, so let's talk about, you know what? Let's use this as an excellent segue to talk about Venli and Relaine, because we've briefly mentioned their names every now and then in our rants, but let's specifically talk about every single one of the issues that we have, which are so many. So many.
Save. Go. Let me find the tabs.
Steph is just like, hold on, I need to find the receipt. Sarah and I are just like, vibes. We're doing this based on vibes. And also the fact that we did not like a single thing that happened there. So, very, very big complaint that I have. So I'm personally completely fine with Venli blaming herself. You know, again, disclaimer. I like characters who blame themselves for things that aren't necessarily inside of their control, because I personally think it makes for very tragic meow meows, and that is very fun to observe. However, I would like to contrast Venli very quickly with a person who also did things under the influence of a power that is directly related to odium, whom we have forgiven very quickly for burning an entire city to the ground. Dalinar, because Dalinar's entire character arc is my, like, mistakes don't define me. I should not have to carry the burden of my tragic past and mistakes all the time. And odium is not going to influence me just based off of the fact that I might be sad the second I realize I did in fact kill my wife.
Which, by the way, is very interesting because, like, he quote unquote takes account by you cannot have my pain, and yet every single time there's someone who's like, hey, I'm actually not okay with you, he's like, well, but that's not who I am anymore.
Yeah, that's also super fun. Like, the whole amnesia plot is very convenient for him. But, like, the entire point of this, like, contrast is the fact that Dalinar gets to consistently be forgiven because he was under the influence of the thrill, aka something that we've tied to odium, I believe in book 3, if I remember correctly. So, this weird power TM that makes specifically Alethi men very susceptible to feeling super triumphant on a battlefield where they kill a fuck ton of people. So Dalinar gets to be forgiven for that. Meanwhile, Venli has to consistently struggle with the fact that she might or might not have caused the death of her people, which is not true because throughout the back flashes, like flashbacks. There we go. The flashbacks of book 4, we learned that one of the reasons all of that happened with the listeners specifically is because Venli was under the influence of Ulum, a spren that is directly, or more or less directly tied to odium, if I understood that correctly, was basically trying to influence Venli onto the path of, you're supposed to maybe make it very nice for your listeners to actually be under the control of odium, because odium would like everyone under his control because that makes his army bigger. Wonderful. And again, disclaimer, I don't have a problem with a character struggling with this, and I personally do think that if everything else was not the problem, I would actually like how Venli's character arc is portrayed, how she struggles with herself, how she struggles with her past, how she struggles with everything that's been going on, and how she personally does think this is her fault, even though it technically kind of really actually is not her fault, excuse me. And so I would like her arc. Again, I really would, but it is contrasted so directly with Dalinar's, and Dalinar takes no responsibility of his actions whatsoever, apart from the fact that he gets to publish a book that basically says, I killed my wife and I'm really sorry about it. Meanwhile, Venli has to consistently struggle with the fact that the people who are supposedly fighting for her, aka the Fused, are actually not fighting for her because they think the listeners are not exactly great. And so she consistently struggles under basically the oppression of two people, which again, Brandon Sanderson conveniently conflates as to being the exact same thing. Both the Fused and the humans don't care about the listeners. The problem here is the humans are the ones who have enslaved the singers in the first place. So maybe conflating them with the Fused, aka the people who suffered so much that they were, willing to put their eternal spirit at risk to be consistently involved in this war, is a bad thing. But we never get that, because the only thing we get is Venli consistently feeling bad for humans, and consistently feeling bad about the fact that she's not like humans, which is including but not limiting towards the fact that she looks at Kaladin grieving Teft and goes, wow, I never even grieved my sister like this. Normal people apparently have emotions.
Oh my god. There's a particular scene, which I cannot find, so
okay,
I'm going to try to remember this as best I can, but I remember writing it in our chat where I think it might be where Verboniel and Squad first break into Urithiru and the humans are fighting them down the stairs, or the humans
I know which scene you mean. Right? I know which scene you mean, yes.
And Venli is, or was it Venli, or was it Leshmi? I think it was Venli.
I think it's Venli, yes.
Was thinking to themselves, man, you got to just stop and appreciate the way that these humans fight.
Yes.
Who says that?
Yes. It is so bad. And this is the thing again that I mean, where I say I would like to like Venli as a complex character. I really would. And to a certain degree, I do like her as a complex character. But in the grand scheme of things, she consistently serves to putting listeners and singers down in favor of humans. Mm-hmm. And that is the issue that I have. And Relaine falls into a similar category, except his category is, I was oppressed by the humans, but also it's okay because the humans, aka Bridge 4, were the first people to give me a home, which is not true because in flashbacks we see him explicitly interact with Venli and Ashonai. And so him saying that Bridge 4 was the first family he really found is basically putting down the entirety of the listeners' family grounds, the listeners' tribe, if I can call it that, by saying that Relaine never felt as comfortable with them as he did with humans, who quite literally gave him a name that would be reminiscent of calling a human child human.
Relaine serves the purpose of being the token oppressed character, which just is like, hey, I was mistreated, and if I can forgive them, you can forgive them too. And that is this was a choice that was made. I am not going to overlook it. I am not going to forgive it. There is no rational reason for this, but Sanderson felt that of the 1,200 pages of this book, that was something that needed to be established, and apparently it's important.
It's really, really bad.
Question, did you guys talk about the Min Cardassian characters? Apparently that was supposed to be Hispanic rep. Listen. Listen,
has things to say about that. Don't worry.
There are so many ways in which many characters in this series are coded. I think we talked about it in book 1 or book 2. A character that I feel like we haven't heard from in a little while. What was their name? They kept Lopen, yes, kept saying gancho, which I think was used as like some sort of fantastical version of esse, and had all these cousins that could just kind of like move in and out of places. Like, why, Sanderson? Why is this something that you needed to do? Because it's bad enough when I see that surface level representation of characters in like other media, but you chose to create a fantastical world, and you chose this as something that you wanted us to establish as like cultural differentiation between people. What was the purpose? I need someone to tell me, because if anything, all it did was just make me feel offended.
I'm pretty sure that either in live show 2 or live show 3, you, Steff, specifically talked about the whole thing of like her, Daisy, and people having like a bunch of siblings and cousins being very stereotypically Hispanic coded.
Yes, they were.
You know, I'm pretty sure that happened in one of the live shows.
I think it was book 1, but I could be wrong.
It was one of the 3. I'm pretty sure it was not number 3, because I'm pretty sure the issue came up way before book 3.
It did. But I don't understand why this is something that needed to happen. We have enough issues at hand plot-wise that we need to resolve. This entire war that's happening on the Shattered Plains in the backdrop, we still need to come back to. We haven't been back there in how long now? And it's still one of the driving factors of this. But no, we needed to code a couple more characters for what? For who to feel seen? Because honestly, it's not me. I don't feel seen.
And the thing with the mink I hate is that him calling out Dalinar is literally one of the only scenes I truly celebrate. It's so good. However, the next time we see the mink, he's already crawling up Dalinar's ass and has to be like, I don't like you, but you know, you defeated us, so you're a good general, so I will follow you.
I would like to very quickly, this has nothing to do with Wenley and Verlaine, but I also don't think that Dalinar specifically is like a big enough figure in this book for us to talk about him specifically. So I'm just going to mention this in passing. The way that people consistently say that Dalinar is a good general is so incredibly not true. Full stop. But I'm gonna explain that very quickly, because I am correct here, and I know that I am. But basically, there are so many instances where people are like, "Oh my God, Dalinar is such a good general," and I'm like, "No, he really is not." Like, there's this entire point in book 4 where Dalinar is basically trying to convince the other people like who they should attack next. And his entire point is, I want to attack Alethkar, because Alethkar is currently under control of the Fused, which very famously happened at the end of book 3, where we find out that the Alethkar main city, which I forgot the name of.
Kholinar.
Thank you. Kholinar is basically has been under control of Sja-anat, which I think is her name, aka one of the corrupted big friend or whatever. And so basically the entirety of Alethkar has been under control of other people. And so the entire point of book 3 was, we give up Alethkar for Urithiru, but we're trying to gain enough forces to get Alethkar back. Right? That was the entire point of book... Well, not the entire point, but that was one big plot point of book 3. Is that they lost Alethkar, they gained Urithiru, they gained the support of other monarchs and other people in control of other countries, and then they were trying to form this, like, army alliance to get Alethkar back. However, in book 4, there's explicit scenes where, especially like the Mink, but also other generals are like, well, Dalinar, I don't think attacking Kholinar and I don't think trying to get Alethkar back is the, like, strategically sound decision to make. And Dalinar is basically like, well, may shucks, that sucks. I would really love to have Alethkar back because it's my home country, but I guess if you're saying this, we're gonna attack other countries now, and for some reason, there's gonna be a war now with other countries that we've never heard about. And then in Navani's perspective, we have this immediate moment where Navani is like, well, this is just a sign that he's such a good general. because he's learned constraint. He's learned that just because he personally wants Alethkar back, this is not a good decision to make. Because trying to lead all the troops against Alethkar is probably going to lose him the troops, because this is currently a very big stronghold of the enemy, aka the Fused. And I'm just over here like, why are you praising him for reluctantly giving up on Alethkar? Like, he didn't even make the decision himself. He himself said, I would love to have Alethkar back, which, fair enough, it's his home country, whatever. And then other people were like, hey, maybe going against Alethkar is not a good decision. And then he was like, well, I guess you're right. And now Navani is praising him for making a strategic decision. He didn't. He was overruled in like a bunch of generals making decisions. And this happens again with Uruthira, which I had a minor breakdown about in Discord as well, where I was basically like, Dalinar says something along the lines of like, we should go to Uruthira. And Jasna is like, well, I don't think this is logical right now. I think the logical decision is to march against a whole other country, which I forgot the name of right now, because I don't feel a whole lot of countries besides Alethkar are super important to Brandon Sanderson, but that's a whole different thing. And so Jasna's basically like, I think we should march against another country right now and try to get control of the war that's happening there. And again, Dalinar is like, well, I kind of guess you're right, but also giving up on Uruthira means you're giving up on hope. And I'm over here like,
to be fair though, I think the reason why Jasna was against it was only to make Dalinar seem smart, because there's one really, really, really good argument for Uruthira, and that's the Oath Gates. It's where all the Oath Gates come together. You do not want anyone else to hold Uruthira.
But the problem is that argument does not come up, because Jasna essentially says, like, marching against Uruthira when there's something at work here that makes the Knights Radiant unable to access their powers is stupid, which I do agree with. And then for some reason, the argument that Dalinar pulls out of her sleeve is, you can't give up hope. I'm like, buddy, what hope? What does Uruthira have to do with hope? Nothing. You're not making any sense strategically or just logically in general. Can you shut up about hope? It makes no sense in whatever argument you're trying to pull. I was very tired of that scene.
Actually, can we get towards wrapping up, because I realize I'm just like slowly falling.
That's okay. That's okay.
You're just listing up towards one side, like, good night, guys. I'm gonna go to sleep.
We are in different time zones. It's okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we really want to discuss, or pressing matters?
No, I don't.
I guess I actually want to. I can't click on the comments from chat because I'm not logged in.
Oh yeah, I could do it.
But the Cosmere Dragon comments, I really want to comment on this, because like, I think it's one of those important things that we did already kind of, but a lot more snarky. Now we don't have to be snarky anymore, because now hopefully everyone who we do want to be here has left already.
Hopefully so. Yeah.
One of the things that we've been talking about sometimes also in chat, for us, it's like, yes, we discuss these topics, but the reason why we discuss these topics, and we're very happy if they get people to think, but like, our goal isn't here, and I do hope that got across also, our goal isn't here to spoil the enjoyment for everyone of Win and Truth. It can happen, like it has happened for me before, where I had a blind spot for something that happened in a series, and it spoiled my enjoyment, and it sucks sometimes, and sometimes you still enjoy it. But I also have series that I love that have some deeply problematic things in them. I think thinking critically of books and of series doesn't always have to spoil the enjoyment. It can lead to that sometimes, because you become more aware of things, especially when people, like, for me, actually, a lot of times it's more so like, I'm often more aware already of like social and problematic quote unquote issues than I am of like writing issues. So if someone points out writing issues, that can lead to me to it spoiling the enjoyment for me way more because of the other things I'm often already aware, and I will I will engage with books differently depending on what the contents are. So I think the goal that we have isn't necessarily to spoil anything, obviously. Like, and we're very happy for everyone for whom it's their favorite series. Like, I think having favorite series is so important no matter what type of series it is. But maybe to just encourage engaging with it differently.
Yeah, definitely.
Both can be true. And I'll even say, like, again, just to like reiterate and add to that, is like, you can enjoy things and acknowledge that, hey, there's things about it that just are an issue that the author needs to address. These are problems in it, but I still love it. I'm actually doing that right now. I'd be a hypocrite not to say that, because I'm reading one of my favorite horror authors right now. And admittedly, when they talk about social issues in their books, I don't think that it goes well. I don't think that it's a topic that they handle as thoroughly as I would like to. But I love the way that they write horror, and that's okay. So if you love this series because you love the magic and like you like Brandon Sanderson's world building, whatever the case is, like all of that is valid. You can like something and be critical of it. Both are true.
Yes. And also the other thing, and that wasn't the case for anyone who was in chat, the other important thing is also to just like listen to people who bring up those issues. And if people have these issues, don't tell them to just ignore them and read the books anyway. If someone's like, hey, I've heard this about this author and I don't want to read it because of that, let them. They probably have a big enough TBR as it is. And sometimes you get bummed out because maybe your best friend doesn't want to read your favorite series and you can't share that thing. But also, I'm sure you can share enough other things, so.
Exactly. Yes. So, like, the basic point that we're trying to make is, first of all, it's okay to discuss things critically, even if you still enjoy them. Josh, again, is like the biggest example of this that we have, because he's been consistently on our side, which we fully appreciate, because every single time we run into issues, we just go, Josh.
Also, Josh, our radiant in the comment section, just going like, suck it up. I'm in a group with them.
Like, Josh is our biggest ally with this. We love you so much. We appreciate everything that we do for us, and the fact that you still love to be in our
correcting us right now.
Exactly. Like, you just really want us to be right in our hating, and I appreciate that so much. But basically, our biggest point is, if you want to engage with something critically and still love it, that is your prerogative. If you don't want to engage with something critically and love it, that is also your prerogative. Our biggest point for making this series and making these discussions is that we just wanted to have a space where, first of all, we could air our feelings, because we have so many of them, as you could tell. But second of all, where other people could feel welcome in their feelings as well, and maybe like invite some discussions, because we also know that some fan forums, because of Josh, that's why we know this, but some fan forums also have these like discussions where they're like, hey, I don't like this certain issue that Brandon Sanderson engages in, I still think his books are great. That is completely fine. We don't mind that.
Allowed to say this? I think part of the reason why we also felt this need to make this is because we kind of met in a fan forum with a lot of very great people who, however, did not allow these discussions.
Exactly. So, like, part of the reason
actually how we started a whole other group chat, because we were like,
For like, wait a second.
Part of the reason we're making this is because we really wanted a space where we could share our feelings without feeling judged for said feelings. And I personally would love for that to be true to like Cosmere fans as well. That they, if they want to engage with these videos, that they can feel like they can share their opinions without being judged necessarily, but while engaging in discussions which might or might not bring up feelings that you're not fully ready to confront yet, which is fair. Again, reading to a certain degree is a hobby. We don't expect everyone to engage with everything they read super critically. Just because we do this sometimes for some series that we used to like but don't anymore, doesn't mean you have to do the same. But we want a space for those discussions because we've noticed that in some Brandon Sanderson forums, it is very hard to have these discussions without people immediately trying to rebut you with points you weren't even trying to make.
And something
also just mentioning, you really don't need to read this critically. We're all talking from experience. Like, even if you enjoy this book, reading through 1,200 pages critically is like
tiring.
It's so tiring.
It's exhausting.
The amount of times we've posted in the Discord, like, oh my god, I am so fucking done with this. You don't want to know how many times we've done that. Because I can tell you right now, if I look this up in the Discord for myself, I'm probably going to encounter at least 30 messages like this.
Yes.
So don't put yourself through this, is all I'm saying.
Yes. And part of the motivation, again, for me is because, like, I'm the kind of reader where I actively look for positive and negative reviews of everything I read. I love hearing from people who have a differentiating opinion, because sometimes they see things that I didn't see, and I'm like, you know what? I hadn't thought of it that way. That's really interesting. Or they bring up a point and I'm like, you know what? I disagree, and that's okay. But in order to have that kind of discussion and engage with the book on that level, I can't do that in an echo chamber. And when we were reading the series, it just felt like it was so hard to find anybody who was going as deep into the issues as what we saw, what that made us come together to the point that we did. So we're like, you know what? Why not? Let's just start here. Why not?
Exactly. Like, this is just the main issue that we have with the fandom as a whole, is that sometimes it felt impossible for us to have critical decisions or like discussions while everyone else was not having them. So again, if you don't want to engage in critical discussions about the series itself, about Brandon himself, that is completely fine. We don't judge you for that. We invite you to have discussions with us. We invite you to have some sort of like critical thinking when it comes to his work if you want to. But if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to engage with it, if you don't want to reread 5,000 plus pages just to be critically aware of what's going on, you really don't have to do this. But if you would like to have a discussion with us, if you would like to like think about things more critically, if you would like to like discuss certain things that are happening in his works, you are more than welcome to do so in this space. You're also welcome to disagree with us, as we've said multiple times throughout this video. If you don't want to say, hey, I still love Brandon Sanderson, that's completely fine. Again, I'm pretty sure that Josh has rated every single Stormlight Archive book 5 stars. He's in a Discord group chat with us. You don't want to know what kind of horrible commentary goes on in this Discord group chat.
And again, it's also fine if you read it critically and come to different conclusions than us.
Yeah, that's the
Like,
entire
that
point of
is-
reading
that is
something
the
critically.
fun of literary analysis. Like, the basis still needs to be the text to a certain degree, but text can be read many different ways.
Exactly. So, like, if you come to different conclusions that we did, that is completely fine. We would love for you to share that with us, actually, because that is how discourse happens. You need different people to agree or disagree on different things, and then you talk about it, and you come to conclusions, or you don't. Like, it is completely fine to agree to disagree in literary discourse. That is the exact purpose of literary discourse.
Also, genuinely, on a lot of books, I think especially with the Puppy War books, that was it. I've like a lot of times I've been like, I don't know why exactly this is a problem for me, but this is a problem for me. And then through someone disagreeing with me, I realized why something is a problem.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we literally, like, we're shitting on Sanderson, not on the readers.
Yes.
Basically.
Exactly, that's the point. Like, we're trying to invite discussion. If you have something that you disagree with in the, like, 4 live shows at this point that we've shared with you, if there's something you fundamentally disagree with, that is completely fine, because chances are this is your personal opinion of what you decide the text is supposed to be like, and we hope that you've come to that conclusion in the end, because it means that you know more about yourself and your own opinion on literature, which is always great. So, you know.
Also, I want to add the caveat that I'm of the firm belief that reviews are for readers, not for authors.
Yes.
Because then if it's for authors, you have things like what's happening now, which is inserted fan service that just doesn't make sense with the plot.
Exactly. I think that's all of our disclaimers out of the way.
Also, just at the end, can you see my big mug?
Oh, cute.
It's very
Christmas market. It's like candy, and I love it.
Cute.
And it's great.
Nice.
It's like literally my face.
Okay, so I think that's going to be it for this live show, right? We've gotten through all the points that we really wanted to get to. Cannot say thank you enough to everybody who has been here in the chat with us, everybody who's come in and had similar opinions or differentiating opinions or just here for the vibes. Appreciate you being here. And if you are watching this post live and you decide to leave something in comments, civil comments are appreciated, again, because we are inviting constructive conversation about this. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Roro.
And if you're rude, it really depends on our personal mood on the day if you get a reply back and how
or which one of us you get a reply from.
I'm just gonna say, with the mood I'm in currently and pre-Christmas stress, I will promise nothing in terms of I will try to keep it somewhat civil because it's not on my channel, but
I'm so proud of you, Sarah. You're doing great.
But for anybody who is following us and this journey and wants to know where we're going next, so we are reading book 5. Not at the moment. I think we're currently slating the next live to be in February. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was like end of February, beginning of March.
Yeah, I think so.
We usually
because none of us wanted to start the year with having to read Sanderson. So
yeah, we don't want to start our year with a deep critical analysis. We'd rather just start with something fun that we are more likely to enjoy.
Exactly.
Maybe it would be a smart idea with the January pages challenge from Storygraph.
Oh, you're right. They do that on January. Yeah, I forgot about
that. Yeah. But we usually like to give ourselves like a 2-month bandwidth to regroup, process, pick up the next one, have our discussion, and then prepare for a live. So the next one, I think it's going to be on Scylla's channel.
I think so, yes. I think we agreed to that. Yep.
So the next live will be on Scylla's channel for book 5, and then we are potentially planning one final let's reflect on the past year live.
Year and a half at that point, probably.
Yeah, and that'll be on Sarah's channel, and then also there will be independent vlogs posted by some of us. I know for me, I'll be posting a vlog for book 5.
I'll try making a vlog for book 5. I still have the gender video in my drafts, although I'm not gonna lie, I might need to refilm. After reading book 4 now, so yeah, and then we'll see.
Sometimes might be from
See, this is why we say that Josh is our ally first and foremost.
Okay.
Love you, Josh.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, so much. And wow, 3-hour mark. We made it. Okay.
3 hours. Yes.
All right.
So
everybody.
proud of us. Let's go.
All right. That's going to be it. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are. Bye.
Bye-bye.